out, squaring people out.
And neither mob violence nor police brutality have any place in America.
I accept your nomination.
My name is Jimmy Carter.
Peace is rational.
I still believe in a place called hope.
Thank you.
E pluribus unum. Out of many, one.
Barack knows the American dream because he's lived it.
The first time that a major party has nominated a woman for president.
An unprecedented Democratic National Convention at what will be an almost entirely virtual event.
We're in the battle for the soul of the nation. I'm proud now to have Senator Harris at my side.
Welcome to NBC's special coverage of the 2020 Democratic National Convention. Right now, only on NBC News Now. I'm Chuck Todd. We are less than an hour away from the start of the first ever virtual convention as Democrats begin the historic process of officially nominating Joe Biden as their presidential candidate and Kamala Harris as their vice presidential candidate. Taking place amid the upheaval of a global pandemic, this is going to be a convention the likes of which we have never before seen in American politics. And let's be frank, we don't know how effective this convention will be, how much it will grab your attention. But on paper, let's take a look. It could. The primetime convention lineup tonight and all this week will showcase the Democratic Party's vision for the future. Headliners include Senator Bernie Sanders and former First Lady Michelle Obama, both who speak tonight, and both, by the way, who spoke on the opening night of the Democratic Convention 4 years ago. Biden's wife and former Second Lady Jill Biden speak tomorrow. The vice presidential nominee, Kamala Harris, will share Wednesday night with former President Obama. And, of course, Thursday is reserved for the nominee, Joe Biden. There are a whole bunch of important issues the Democrats are going to attempt to address with this convention, from the numerous crises facing this country to the ideological divisions within the party. Though they hope to paper over those, and without live delegates in person, they may be able to pull that off. But as we gear up for tonight, perhaps the biggest question looming over this convention is quite simply, how is this going to work? For this opening night, the Democrats plan to focus on the pandemic, the economy, and racial justice. And one might argue we'll hear all three of those topics every night this week. Party tells us that they're going to try to pull off a mix of live and pre-recorded content in prime time, while navigating hundreds of thousands of feeds from all over the country in an attempt to create some spontaneity. It's an enormous undertaking in an untested format on the national stage. Needless to say, a lot of Democrats will be holding their collective breaths tonight, and perhaps all this week, as the Biden campaign, first and foremost, tries to do no harm, protect their lead in the polls with just weeks to go before the first votes are cast. So, to get a preview of where the ticket thinks things are, let's go to Wilmington, Delaware, which is basically the unofficial headquarters of the Democratic Party these days. And that's where we find my NBC News colleague, Kristen Welker. And Kristen, Milwaukee's the host city, but Wilmington has all the action.
Chuck, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are going to be actually speaking in this convention hall behind me. Now, you're not going to have packed crowds inside because of COVID, of course. These speeches will be broadcast virtually. However, the party is going to try to capture some of the same energy by holding virtual watch parties and getting some real-time reaction shots. They're also going to hold a virtual roll call tomorrow night. But you're absolutely right in terms of the high stakes when it comes to the technology of all of this. I've been speaking to officials who've been involved in the planning, one telling me that a successful convention will mean that no one's satellite shots went down. Now, in terms of tonight, what are we expecting to hear? Former First Lady Michelle Obama is going to be delivering the keynote address, and she is going to make the case for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And against President Trump, she's really going to cast this as a failure of leadership based on pre-recorded remarks, part of which were released a little bit earlier on this evening. And she's going to argue that she knows firsthand that Joe Biden was a good vice president and has all of the tools and skills in order to be a strong president now, particularly in the age of COVID. And Chuck, we expect her to speak very personally about Joe Biden as well, about the losses that he has endured in his life, including Beau Biden. And she's going to argue that that makes him someone who can understand the struggles of others, a real counterpoint, she will argue, to President Trump. Now, President Trump has been trying to counter-program all of this. He held a campaign event in Wisconsin earlier today and essentially said, who wants to listen to Michelle Obama deliver a pre-recorded address? Well, the answer to that is, if you look at the polls, Michelle Obama is one of the most popular political figures in the entire country. And Chuck, I've had conversations with campaign and White House officials who say she is quite a powerful force. So you talk about unifying the party. She will be there to try to do that, but also to try to reach across the aisle, to try to reach some of those people who voted for candidate Trump back in 2016. And to help her with that, Senator Bernie Sanders, he's going to send a strong message tonight to his progressive base to energize behind Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And then you have some Republicans speaking tonight as well, including Ohio Governor John Kasich. But there is no doubt former First Lady Michelle Obama is going to be the centerpiece of this first night here, Chuck.
No, there's no doubt Michelle Obama was, I think, almost more requested than Barack Obama during the big midterm elections at times in those suburban swing districts. Very quickly, Kristen, we know Donald Trump is going to show up every night of his convention in some form. Considering this is a virtual event and they could pop Joe Biden in anytime they want, should we expect to see Joe Biden tonight?
We could, in fact, see Joe Biden tonight. In fact, we're getting indications that we might see him in some type of town hall format. And, Chuck, that is yet another aspect of this convention that is going to be so incredibly unique. Typically, you would see the candidate on the final night, the big reveal. Sure. Well, that's not going to be the case. Again, officials here say that we will likely see Joe Biden and Kamala Harris throughout this entire convention. And that is yet another way that they're going to try to drum up and energize their base. We're not going to have a balloon drop, Chuck. Those iconic moments that people look forward to. And so the party's really trying to get creative about ways in which to energize and excite the party.
Well, here at NBC, we'll have a balloon drop at Andrea Mitchell's home studio. Because Andrea always has to we have to have that balloon drop, so that we will figure out at some point. Kristen, thank you for getting us started. Like I said, being in Wilmington, Delaware, you are in the center of the political universe right now in American politics. Kristen, thank you. Before any of the speeches and digital pageantry from this unique convention season, where does this race stand before we get things started? Well, our brand new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll shows President Trump, with what we called in First Read this morning, has a 50% problem. Let's start with the big number. 50% of all registered voters we surveyed in our poll are backing the soon-to-be Democratic nominee, Joe Biden, over President Trump. And stick with us on this 50 number. When it comes to their feelings towards the president, 52% have a negative view of the president, including 44% of all voters who have a very negative view. The president's job approval, also still underwater. 53%, yet another majority, disapprove of the president's overall job, including 47% who tell us they strongly disapprove. And then there's the handling of the coronavirus. Yet another majority number in this one. The reason we are all not in person in Milwaukee this week and in Charlotte next week, 58% of those we surveyed disapprove of President Trump's handling of the coronavirus pandemic. On the issues themselves, this is where the president does hold some advantages over Joe Biden. On issues like the economy and crime, he's ahead. On mental and physical fitness for office, they're basically tied, only a 2-point difference since both of them well into their 70s. You can hear those themes from the president in almost every speech he gives. He knows those are two of his 3 advantages, and he wants to believe the fitness issue is one. And the issues where Biden leads the president are on race relations, bringing the country together, healthcare, coronavirus, immigration, foreign policy, and strong leadership. Some big numbers for Biden ahead of these 2 convention weeks. And that also sets up the idea that don't expect a big convention bounce. He's already pretty close to his ceiling. So joining me now to break all this down, NBC's Capitol Hill correspondent and host of KCDC, Casey Hunt is here, MSNBC anchor Joshua Johnson, and president of the Center for American Progress, Neera Tanden. All right, let's preview a little bit tonight. Casey, first the reason I laid out the poll the way we did is this is not going to be, it's a unique convention that we're seeing. But I do think folks need to realize this is a convention in some ways, as David Plouffe said to me, Joe Biden doesn't, he just needs to do no harm. It's Donald Trump who really needs a good convention next week. So in the do no harm category, how do you have a do no harm convention that also excites your base?
Well, first of all, Chuck, ideally none of the Zooms cut out or, the feeds don't go down. I think that's going to be job number one. As simplistic as it sounds, there's been a lot of planning that's gone into this, a lot of work. And, you don't really want to end up on the late night talk shows for this. But that aside, I think in the big picture, you've seen the Biden campaign set the stage to try and be that 50% plus party. They have invited Republicans in John Kasich and progressives in Bernie Sanders to kick off the night and capped it with Michelle Obama, who is one of the more unifying and popular figures across the board, not just with Democrats, but with all Americans. And I think that sets up kind of what they're going for here. They are trying to say to everyone that what matters is character, what matters is how you lead, more than the issues that may traditionally divide people like John Kasich from Bernie Sanders, whether it's emotional issues like abortion or fiscal issues like spending, to say that what is going on in the White House is so bad that we all can get on the same page and address it. And I think we're going to look to the tenor of the speeches tonight. We're going to see if that message does resonate from all of those corners, if people do seem to be generous and welcoming. President Biden has set a very gracious tone toward his former rivals, and it seems toward people in the opposite party. That hasn't been something Americans seem to really want to embrace in our hyper-partisan politics, but perhaps that wide middle of the country is really ready for that after so much, frankly, so many terrible and difficult months amid this pandemic, Chuck.
Joshua Johnson, this issue of unity, I think in some ways I worry the political press is kind of rolling their eyes at the fact that Bernie Sanders and John Kasich are both speaking in support of Joe Biden tonight. And when you really think about it, 4 years ago, John Kasich was trying desperately to win the Republican nomination. It was in his home state of Cleveland, Ohio. And here he is now at the opposite party's convention. And I think sometimes, again, I have a feeling that might be this might be a more impactful night than maybe we political reporters give it, because John Kasich's been against Trump for 4 years. But this will mean something to just average Americans, I think.
I think it will, and I think that Casey is astute in saying that this is the night to paint the 50+1 picture, because you're right, there are a number of Republican politicos on the agenda tonight. In addition to Governor Kasich, Christine Todd Whitman, Meg Whitman, there's a young woman who's speaking named Kristen Urquiza, whose father, Anthony Urquiza, voted for Donald Trump and has since died of COVID-19. So her message will be among the messages from people who feel betrayed or let down or maybe embarrassed of what Donald Trump has meant for the Republican Party. I think the Democrats remember well the lesson of 2016, that for want of a nail, that war was lost. And so tonight gives them an opportunity to paint a picture of a broad coalition of people who are united by their desire to get rid of Donald Trump. Our Wall Street Journal NBC News poll also showed that people who support Joe Biden are more likely to support him not because they like him, but because they dislike the other guy. And tonight feels like it's going to be that night for everybody who dislikes the other guy. Yeah. So whether or not you're crazy about Joe Biden, by the end of the week, if they do their work correctly, if they hit that 50+1 mark, it may not make a difference.
It may not, but I would argue by the end of the week, I think they would like more people to say, hey, I'm really voting for Joe Biden.
Ideally,
not just but I take your point. I definitely think tonight is we know you don't like Donald Trump, and here are other people that don't like him either. I think you're right. Tonight might be the never Trumper night. Neera Tanden, it's interesting. Mark Murray reminded me this morning. He goes, you know who spoke at night one of the convention 4 years ago? And I was like, who? He goes, Bernie Sanders and Michelle Obama. And I'm like, wow, for two nights that look exactly alike, oh my goodness, it's a big difference from 4 years ago. This party is united in a way that it was not united 4 years ago, Neera.
Yeah, because Donald Trump is now our everyday nightmare, at least Democrats' everyday nightmare. And I think, 4 years ago, he was a possibility. A lot of Democrats thought he was not going to win. A lot of Democrats sort of took it for granted that Hillary would win. And so I think this operated in the primary itself. People were anxious about too much infighting. The primary settled very quickly, in part, I think, because people wanted to get to the general election. And I think that's been operational for the last several months. And I give a lot of credit to Senator Sanders, who worked hard to unify the party, who has sent consistent messages to his voters for not just a week before the convention, but months before the convention, that he is supporting Joe Biden. And I expect him to actually, speak personally tonight about Joe Biden and what kind of president he'll be. He'll talk about, I'm sure, the progressive agenda, but I think he will also make a fervent case on behalf of Joe Biden.
Casey, you've been detecting there's a little bit of, I would say, I don't want to call it progressives are upset. I would say they're disappointed that John Kasich seems to have more speaking time than Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
They're a little peaked, yeah. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted about some of John Kasich's, significant policy differences with the Democratic platform, most notably on abortion rights, which, of course, normally would have divided John Kasich from the party that he is joining this evening. But I do think it's important to underscore that they have been relatively muted compared to what they could be or perhaps would have been in the past. It seems like the push and the drive and frankly, everyone's pretty tired of how nasty and divided everything has been for so long. People are over it. And this is an opportunity to say, okay, you know what? It's kind of bizarre that you're showing up here, but you know what? It's probably better if you and people who like you vote for Joe Biden, so we're going to go along with it. And I think it speaks to Neera's point that, Donald Trump is such a force that generates such strong feelings. And frankly, what we have seen over the last several months has just been so demoralizing for so many families as we all sort of endure this quarantine that, we're just in a different place, and that makes more space for a wider range of views.
Well, speaking of the virus, Joshua, I let me get this, because I find it interesting that the president, in an attempt to troll the convention, Biden and the DNC decided to troll right back. So here's Trump traveling to Wisconsin today, Minnesota. Here's a Biden DNC ad pushing back. Take a look.
Connect the dots. That's what the Tulsa Health Department director said weeks after Trump held a rally in their city, a rally that likely contributed to record-high COVID-19 numbers in Tulsa. Now Trump is coming to Wisconsin for a political stunt that puts you at risk. Just connect the dots.
Joshua, it does seem as if it was sort of like, I find it interesting. The Trump campaign is happy to be campaigning, and the president wants to be out there. And the Biden campaign is happy to be doing it this way.
Yeah, and I think that, that contrast is going to be clearer and clearer as we get closer to November. I mean, the president has been trying to hit Joe Biden for kind of hiding and remaining cloistered and not doing real big public events. To be fair, there are a number of members of the press who would also like to have more access to Mr. Biden, too, right now. But he seems to be quite content just saying, no, there's a pandemic. I'm in my 70s. I'm staying home in Wilmington. You have fun on the road. Right. And that contrast is going to get larger and larger. I think the theme of that ad speaks to something that, to Casey's point about everyone just being tired, I feel is going to be a theme in the next few months, which is our mutuality. Right now, we have three gigantic issues that affect every single American. One is COVID-19, two is racial justice, and three is the post office. So right now, you have every voter of every stripe worried about the same three things. Donald Trump's message so far has mostly been, vote for me or else. Bad things are going to happen. We're going to hear a message tonight and over the next 4 nights about unity, knitting the country back together, finding ways to mutually work our way through our differences, through our problems. And with the backdrop of these three problems, it might depend on who can convince the American people, look, we know you're a Republican, we know you're a Democrat. Any of us could die of COVID-19. All of us need law enforcement to work, and we would all like to get the mail sometime this year. So let's just find the person who can fix this best.
Neera, I jumped in before you had a chance. I'll give you a quick 15 seconds before I jump to break. Go.
Sure. I think the thing it's not just that people are tired. I think Democrats are really open. They're strategically thinking. They're thinking who can actually bring in Republicans and independents because they want a mandate. They think Donald Trump will cheat or he'll do other things. And you need not just to win by a little, you need to win by a lot. So I think that that's also driving the acceptance of a Kasich or other Republicans at a Democratic convention. It shows a strength, not a weakness.
Casey, Joshua, and Neera, stick around. You guys will be back throughout this hour. A lot more to come in this hour. How do Democrats plan to open the party tent to both progressives and those never Trump Republicans? Democratic National Committee Chairman Tom Perez will join us, and so will top Sanders advisor Jeff Weaver. But first, all this hour, we're going to share some memorable moments from past conventions, because I'm a nostalgiaist, which I think some people say is a bad thing to be, but I don't mind a little nostalgia. Here's one of tonight's speakers, Senator Bernie Sanders, speaking in 2016, offering his olive branch to Hillary Clinton.
Let me be as clear as I can be. This election is not about and has never been about Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders or any of the other candidates who sought the presidency. This election is about and must be about the needs of the American people and the kind of future we create for our children and our grandchildren.
Among the chaos, that I found a father trying to teach his son about peace.
We don't have to retaliate with anger. We retaliate with love. That's why we're down here. There's always another way. So that's all I want him to see.
When you need brutal honesty.
This isn't about Donald Trump. This is about 400 years of racism.
When you need answers first thing in the morning.
What needs to be done to make ballots ready to go for the presidential election in November?
When you need to go deep inside the story.
What's a policy change in policing that you would like to see enacted?
And hear from someone who's been there.
Who's telling the truth and who's lying every day. That's the news story Americans want to hear.
You need your Morning Joe, only on MSNBC.
We'd like to think that we live in some sort of post-racial America. We are reminded time and time again that we do not.
Now, I reached out to you after I watched the mayor of Atlanta act as a mom, trying to raise her son, and I think about you and your kids.
I remember her coming home saying, why don't I have a ponytail like the white girls? It's okay to notice that you're different. You just have to not feel less than. That's my thing.
I cherish the fact that we can have these discussions. I feel safe talking about this with you guys.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
But we actually saw a large convoy of the National Guard come through here.
It's news made for your streaming world. Live weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Eastern.
A virus that knows no borders.
A real catastrophe happening here in Brazil before our very eyes.
Our global fight against it unites us.
Here in Mexico City, the people I spoke to said if they don't work, they're not going to be able to feed their families.
Our NBC News and Sky teams are on the ground, learning from where it's been.
The South Korean government is bringing students back over the next couple of weeks in stages.
So that you can better understand how it will impact us here.
Life across Italy is back to normal. It just doesn't look like the same normal as before.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
These are the United States, a united people with a united purpose.
The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave.
A great people has been moved to defend a great nation.
All of us can extend a hand to those in need.
What do you think needs to be fixed, and what would count as justice in this case?
Do you have clarity on what the president has actually ordered?
I have to ask whether the Democratic Party can turn this around so that this is an engine for progressive political change. People are not 6 feet apart from one another for the most part. Are you worried that these two crises may dovetail in terms of the risk of transmission at these ongoing protests?
Welcome back to NBC's special coverage of the 2020 Democratic National Convention, right here on NBC News Now. Tonight's slate of convention speakers shows just how wide a tent Democrats are attempting to pitch this presidential election, with speakers ranging from former Ohio governor and Republican presidential candidate in 2016, John Kasich, to stalwart progressive Senator Bernie Sanders. Neither actually are technically registered members of the Democratic Party. Both will be speaking at the Democratic Party's convention. Now we're going to take a look at two different groups on opposite ends of this coalition that Joe Biden is hoping to build in order to win in November. Moderate Republicans and some left-leaning progressives. We'll be talking to former Bernie Sanders campaign advisor Jeff Weaver in just a second. But first, we're going to go to Kent County, Michigan. That's where we find my colleague Dasha Burns. She's been reporting for our County to County project on the efforts to turn what is an historically red-leaning county blue. Dasha?
Well, Chuck, the Democrats in this county are cautiously optimistic that they can pull it off and turn Kent County blue in 2020 for the first time in more than half a century. And it does help that the last time it happened, Joe Biden was on the ticket in 2008 with Barack Obama. But to do it, they are going to have to chip away at that moderate Republican vote here, which is significant. This is the hometown of Gerald Ford. And Chuck, I don't know how many times I've heard voters tell me that they consider themselves Jerry Ford Republicans. And this is an opportunity for Democrats. And I think they're keen to that with having Kasich speak tonight. I think he's going to hit home for a lot of these Republican voters here who have told me they don't feel like they have a home in the Republican Party anymore, and they're looking to maybe find a home with the Democrats. Take Cynthia Timmerman, for example. She's a voter I've been talking to here. She considers herself a lifelong conservative, but now says she is a, quote, repulsed Republican. And I actually met her at a meeting of the Kent County Democrats where she was exploring her options. I asked her what she's looking to get out of this convention. Take a listen to what she had to say.
You know, I'm not really looking for particulars on issues because I no longer believe a politician when they tell me what their priority is. What I am truly listening for is how they are going to reach across the aisle, how they are going to bridge very obvious and very stark gaps in the priorities, in the way that we are approaching problem solving in this country. I'm tired of the promises. I'm tired of the excuses. I want statesmanship to return in the halls of Washington, D.C.
And Chuck, adding to that optimism for Democrats is what happened here in 2018, where this county did see a shift to blue. Several Democratic candidates won this county, including Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer. And Cynthia actually did vote for her, and she's likely to vote blue up and down the ticket in 2020, in November 2020. Chuck?
Dasha Burns in Kent County, Grand Rapids. And I'll tell you, when I hear people say they're a Jerry Ford Republican, it usually means one word jumps to mind: decency. And that's what I heard from that voter, too, there. That's what she was looking for. Very fascinating. And in some ways, There's a reason why Gerald Ford is the avatar in some ways for Grand Rapids, Michigan. Dasha Burns, thank you. With me now is Jeff Weaver. He's former advisor to the Bernie Sanders campaign. Jeff, it is good to see you. So,
good to see you, Chuck.
Talk about what you believe Bernie Sanders can do best for Joe Biden tonight.
Well, I think there's a few things that Bernie Sanders can do for Joe Biden, one of which is speak to the very broad coalition that supported Senator Sanders' primaries. That was young people of all races. That was his strong support among Latino voters, progressives and progressive Democrats. And he still has a strong base, as you know, among blue-collar workers all across this country. And I think he will speak to them not only about the danger of Trump, but also about the path that Joe Biden will help chart that will uplift working families of all races in this country as we move forward.
What do you make of having Bernie Sanders share the night with John Kasich? You know, it's funny. I talked with Senator Sanders on Sunday. I don't sense he's enthusiastic about that. But at the same time, it does feel as if he's going, look, I'll do whatever it takes. And that's what I'm going to do. Is that a fair description?
Well, he is absolutely committed to making sure that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris get elected. In addition to that, I would say, though, that tonight, I think, demonstrates the extent to which Joe Biden and his campaign, and they deserve a lot of credit for it in terms of their willingness to reach out to progressives and others, to build what we used to call in the progressive left a popular front of people who don't necessarily agree on substance on everything, but are joining together in an electoral effort to defeat a very dangerous and authoritarian president in the person of Donald Trump. So I think it's a very good sign. Obviously, there'll be issues of governance once Joe Biden is elected. And we would hope that, obviously, the Democrats and democratically leaning independents are the ones who are governing. But we are certainly happy to have Republicans as part of our popular front against Donald Trump.
Look, it wasn't lost on a lot of us when we looked at the Democratic Party platform, and there was one reference to Medicare for all, and it clearly was, we know people like it, and we're glad they're in our coalition, and we look forward to making the Affordable Care Act stronger. What would you say? How would you say this platform looks today? Yeah.
What's that?
How would you say this platform looks to progressives today?
Well, there's a lot to like about this platform. It is a more progressive platform than we passed 4 years ago, which then was the most progressive platform through the Democratic Party. If you look at issues around wages, if you look around issues around unionization, if you look around issues around child care, around paid family leave, around climate change, a whole host of issues, Chuck, this platform is head and shoulders above anything that the Democratic Party has put forward before. And the party continues to evolve. And I think over time, given the hard work that Senator Sanders and his supporters have done, we'll continue to move this party in a more progressive direction.
What's a litmus test for you for a President Biden to know that the promises you're hearing now and the reaching across the way they've reached across to your campaign quite a bit, what's your litmus test if he's president that will make you think this was real?
Well, a couple of things. One, I think, he is going to have to appoint a number of progressives to his administration at various levels. I think it's very important to have people inside the administration who share progressive values. And beyond that, I think that the substance that comes out of this administration, the priorities that he sets, have to be priorities that uplift working people, poor people, and marginalized communities. And if he does that, he won't be able to do everything he wants. Bernie Sanders would not have been able to do everything he wanted if he were president. But the question is where you put your emphasis. Are you putting emphasis on passing legislation that helps working people, poor people, and marginalized communities? And if you're doing that, then you're doing the right thing.
What's your biggest concern about the Biden campaign right now? Not necessarily just where things stand. What is your biggest worry about the campaign?
Well, my big worry is that, one of your competitors had a poll out yesterday that showed the race in battleground states is relatively close. I know there's other polling that shows it further apart, but I think we've seen over the last two cycles that a lot of conventional pollsters have had difficulty polling Trump. They certainly had difficulty polling Bernie Sanders accurately. And I'm very concerned that we do not get in a place where people are complacent about a Joe Biden victory and let their foot off the gas. We have got to double down right now. Anything we were doing, we have to do twice as hard. We cannot take this election for granted.
Well, I take it then President Trump is helping you out. The more he talks about mail-in voting and the Postal Service, I mean, I'm not being facetious here. I got to think that actually must help defeat complacency.
Well, I do think it helps. I mean, I think Trump every day helps. But on the other hand, he is doing a real, causing a real harm to the Postal Service. And the Postal Service now in this election for many people is going to be their voting booth. And they are dismantling the voting booth of millions of people around this country. They are certainly, as you know, when this is all over, I'll predict it right here, they will cry wolf about how the election was stolen from them, how fraudulent votes were cast, even though there'll be no evidence of it. And there will be problems getting votes to the voting locations on time because the Postal Service is being destroyed by this president and his henchmen.
Jeff Weaver, who was basically the chief strategist for Bernie Sanders over the last couple of campaign cycles. Good to see you, sir. Thanks for coming on and sharing your perspective with us.
Take care. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Jeff. Up ahead, one state in particular that could make a huge difference for Democrats this November. Hint, we're not there tonight. But as we go to break, this moment from the Democratic Convention in 1984, when then New York Governor Muriel Cuomo argued Ronald Reagan's shining city on a hill had a fair bit of tarnish.
In many ways, we are a shining city on a hill. But the hard truth is that not everyone is sharing in this city's splendor and glory. Mr. President, you ought to know that this nation is more a tale of two cities than it is just a shining city on a hill.
Among the chaos that I found a father trying to teach his son about peace.
We don't have to retaliate with anger. We retaliate with love. That's why we're down here. There's always another way. So that's all I want him to see.
When you need brutal honesty.
This isn't about Donald Trump. This is about 400 years of racism.
When you need answers first thing in the morning.
What needs to be done to make ballots ready to go for the presidential election in November?
When you need to go deep inside the story.
What's a policy change in policing that you would like to see enacted?
And hear from someone who's been there.
Who's telling the truth and who's lying every day. That's the news story Americans want to hear.
You need your Morning Joe, only on MSNBC.
We'd like to think that we live in some sort of post-racial America. We are reminded time and time again that we do not.
Chanel, I reached out to you after I watched the mayor of Atlanta act as a mom trying to raise her son, and I think about you and your kids.
I remember her coming home saying, why don't I have a ponytail like the white girls? It's okay to notice that you're different. You just have to not feel less than. That's my thing.
I cherish the fact that we can have these discussions. I feel safe talking about this with you guys.
You're watching NBC News Now.
We've got some breaking news.
But we actually saw a large convoy of the National Guard come through here.
It's news made for your streaming world. Live weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Eastern.
A virus that knows no borders.
A real catastrophe happening here in Brazil before our very eyes.
Our global fight against it unites us.
Here in Mexico City, the people I spoke to said if they don't work, they're not going to be able to feed their families.
Our NBC News and Sky teams are on the ground, learning from where it's been.
The South Korean government is bringing students back over the next couple of weeks in stages.
So that you can better understand how it will impact us here.
Life across Italy is back to normal. It just doesn't look like the same normal as before.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
These are the United States, a united people with a united purpose.
The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave.
A great people has been moved to defend a great nation.
All of us can extend a hand to those in need.
What do you think needs to be fixed, and what would count as justice in this case? Do you have clarity on what the president has actually ordered? I have to ask whether the Democratic Party can turn this around so that this is an engine for progressive political change. People are not 6 feet apart from one another for the most part. Are you worried that these two crises may dovetail in terms of the risk of transmission at these ongoing protests?
Welcome back. President Trump is en route to the White House after leaving Wisconsin a few hours ago, while the Democratic Party is about to kick off their convention that was supposed to be in Wisconsin. The president's visit to Wisconsin is just part of his swing through several battleground states this week as he attempts to troll the Democrats a bit. Milwaukee, of course, was chosen as the DNC's host city, in part to energize Democratic voters in the state of Wisconsin, because it was Donald Trump who narrowly won the state in 2016. Wisconsin, along with Michigan and Pennsylvania, are swing states that the Democrats are looking to flip back to blue this time around. As you can see, they all narrowly, very narrowly, went for Trump in 2016. And now former Vice President Joe Biden is up by at least 6 points in each of those states. It appears, talk to most people, they think Michigan's the farthest out of reach for him, but Wisconsin and Pennsylvania still look like they're very much in play. Even now, with the scaled-down version of their convention, Democrats are hoping they can still energize parts of Wisconsin's electorate, particularly in Milwaukee, which could still be key in deciding who carries Wisconsin. Our own NBC News correspondent, Garrett Hake, is on the ground in Milwaukee. And Garrett, do Milwaukee folks still feel like they're a host city?
They seem to, Chuck. I got to tell you, this is playing pretty big locally. I just got in yesterday afternoon, but watching the local news last night, the first 15 minutes or so of the late local news was all about the convention. Now, some of it is the convention that wasn't, right? The missing out on the local business spending and the missing out on all the dollars that come in. But there is certainly a sense that the Democratic Party still got a bit of the payoff for getting as organized as they did here, bringing staff in here, and for trying to make this city feel special, feel like it's part of the coalition, feel like it's part of turning this state back blue. So, yeah, I think the convention still plays pretty large here for an event that's not in any real sense happening here.
And about the ticket itself, Kamala Harris, is she going to provide the boost to help get the votes out in Milwaukee County? When, if you look at all of the sort of analysis of 2016, you could pinpoint the loss, Hillary Clinton's loss in one county, and that's Milwaukee.
Yeah, it's interesting. I spent all day talking to black voters in Milwaukee County about this race, and the Kamala Harris pick absolutely looms large for a number of them. Older voters see her as a kind of a fulfillment of a promise, this idea that black voters, in particular black women, were so instrumental to Joe Biden even being the nominee of the Democratic Party. The selection of Harris, they view it as him basically saying, like, you're going to be loyal to me, I'm going to be loyal to you. And then I think there's this element of voters here feeling like she hears their message, and that reflects positively on Biden, who I think they think also then must be listening to the voices of African-American communities. I want to play you a little bit of sound from a woman I interviewed today who told me just when she watched Kamala Harris walk across the stage, she decided she was going to volunteer for the campaign. So taking that up from being a voter to an activist, here's how she kind of handicaps how Biden's doing here. Take a listen.
I think he's doing some of those things. He's talking about those things that are important to people in Milwaukee. In Milwaukee, we have a higher unemployment rate amongst African Americans than amongst white residents. So he's talking about things like creating and bringing jobs back to this country. He is also talking about affordable health care. That's a huge issue in this community. He is also taking a look at ways in which education can be improved. And for a lot of people, he's talking about the environment. And that is something that's really important to folks as we begin to see how our environment really is changing, how climate change is impacting us.
So, Chuck, everybody I talked to really in both parties thinks this state will be close. But for the Democrats, any movement on the margin, whether they're able to bring those numbers up in Milwaukee County in terms of voters, whether they're able to turn some of those people who were voted for Hillary Clinton into volunteers, into activists to kind of activate more of their communities, all of that movement at the margins, I think, really could matter here.
It absolutely, Garrett. When you look at Wisconsin election results over the last decade, it feels like it's the most organized state in the country. Everybody knows how everybody's going to vote. It all just depends who shows up on any given election day, whether one side wins by 2 or the other side wins by 2. Anyway, Garrett Hake in Milwaukee.
Exactly right.
Thank you. Let me turn now to my colleague, Peter Alexander. He is at the White House tonight on President Trump duty. And Peter, Mark Murray reminded me 4 years ago this week, Donald Trump had just finished his convention and was busy this week. At the time, he claimed he was being sarcastic, asking for more Russian help with the so-called emails. Now he's trying to troll the Democratic convention on a number of fronts, including mail-in balloting. And now apparently he wants to save the post office. Is the president starting to have a change of heart on this postal business?
Well, I think the president is trying to be more specific about his argument here, hoping that can kind of clean up the confusion that's been created by his comments, because obviously they've been rife with falsehoods, right? The president repeatedly claiming that mail-in balloting is fraudulent. There is obviously no evidence of widespread fraud associated with that. And tonight, Chuck, what was most striking is one of the things the president said during those events he held in both Wisconsin and in Minnesota. As you noted in your conversation with Garrett in Wisconsin, he's almost trying to troll the Democrats, saying, hey, you guys abandoned the city, and I'm going to go to the state of Wisconsin today. But today he said specifically, the only way we lose this election is if it is rigged, which is a telling statement if you consider that, because in some ways it's an acknowledgement that he could potentially lose this thing. It's also sort of a warning shot that if he does end up losing, he may not accept the results. So this was a significant statement we heard from President Trump tonight on this very topic. On the issue of mail-in ballots, again today, we've heard the president repeatedly complaining. He was frustrated that the House Democrats have now scheduled their hearing with Louis DeJoy. He's that Trump-appointed postmaster general to take place on Monday. President Trump saying, hey, Monday, that's the beginning of our convention. I see what they're trying to do here. But the bottom line is the president recognizes that mail-in ballots, as you heard in your conversations earlier with Jeff Weaver, they really are the polling place for so many Americans. As many as 80 million Americans, by some accounts, expected to vote that way this go-around.
Right. And, Peter, we know this all goes because of one anecdotal stat he heard, that he did better on Election Day voting and Democrats did better on the mail-in voting. And so he has taken that one piece of fact and turned it into this denigrating of our entire electoral system, which, of course, at this point now is a bit of an emergency. Anyway, Peter Alexander at the White House for us. Peter, thank you. Up ahead, we're going to speak to the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, Tom Perez, as he gets ready for night one of the Democratic National Convention, which is about to begin in 14 minutes. We'll be right back.
Among the chaos that I found a father trying to teach his son about peace.
We don't have to retaliate with anger. We retaliate with love. That's why we're down here. There's always another way. So that's all I want him to see.
When you need brutal honesty.
This isn't about Donald Trump. This is about 400 years of racism.
When you need answers first thing in the morning.
What needs to be done to make ballots ready to go for the presidential election in November?
When you need to go deep inside the story.
What's a policy change in policing that you would like to see enacted?
And hear from someone who's been there.
Who's telling the truth and who's lying every day. That's the news story Americans want to hear.
You need your Morning Joe, only on MSNBC.
We'd like to think that we live in some sort of post-racial America. We are reminded time and time again that we do not.
Chanel, I reached out to you after I watched the mayor of Atlanta act as mom, trying to raise her son, and I think about you and your kids.
I remember her coming home saying, why don't I have a ponytail like the white girls? It's okay to notice that you're different. You just have to not feel less than. That's my thing.
I cherish the fact that we can have these discussions. I feel safe talking about this with you guys.
You're watching NBC News Now.
We've got some breaking news.
But we actually saw a large convoy of the National Guard come through here.
It's news made for your streaming world. Live weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Eastern.
A virus that knows no borders.
A real catastrophe happening here in Brazil before our very eyes.
Our global fight against it unites us.
Here in Mexico City, the people I spoke to said if they don't work, they're not going to be able to feed their families.
Our NBC News and Sky teams are on the ground, learning from where it's been.
The South Korean government is bringing students back over the next couple of weeks in stages.
So that you can better understand how it will impact us here.
Life across Italy is back to normal. It just doesn't look like the same normal as before.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
These are the United States, a united people with a united purpose.
The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave.
A great people has been moved to defend a great nation.
All of us can extend a hand to those in need.
What do you think needs to be fixed, and what would count as justice in this case?
Do you have clarity on what the president has actually ordered?
I have to ask whether the Democratic Party can turn this around so that this is an engine for progressive political change. People are not 6 feet apart from one another for the most part. Are you worried that these two crises may dovetail in terms of the risk of transmission at these ongoing protests?
Welcome back. We are just now literally moments away from the first night of the Democratic National Convention. It's a big night for the party and its leadership as they try to pull off something that has virtually, literally, as Joe Biden might say, never been tried before in American politics. So joining me now is the party's chairman, Democratic National Committee Chair Tom Perez. And Mr. Chairman, I know Milwaukee was your baby here. You fought hard for Milwaukee. up against my hometown of Miami. We knew how much this meant to you. I know you've got family in Milwaukee. It's got to be bittersweet. On one hand, it's the start of the convention, but you're not in Milwaukee. It must be a little, the way you wanted to be.
Well, I am in Milwaukee right now, and I'm proud to be here. And it's not about Tom Perez's feelings. It's about making sure that we win this election in November. It's about all the people who've lost loved ones because of coronavirus. It's about all the people who've lost their jobs and their livelihoods. It's about the reckless leadership of this president. And it's about making sure that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris get to the White House, because this democracy is on fire. It's a 5-alarm blaze. And I'm so proud of our ticket. And what we're going to see in the next 4 days, starting in about 10 minutes, Chuck, is our unity in action, the Big Ten of the Democratic Party. We welcome all of America. You don't have to be a Democrat to watch the Democratic National Convention. We welcome everyone, and our values are going to be on full display here. I love Milwaukee. It's been a great host. It's been a resilient host. And the challenges we have confronted here are challenges that everyone is confronting. And I'm proud of how we've handled it. We've followed the science, and we're going to have unconventional and remarkable 4 nights.
Look, I assume you're nervous about something. What are you nervous about that you'll share?
Well, I'm nervous about all the people who are suffering right now, and I want to make sure that we're able to help them. This president continues to undermine our institutions of democracy. You were just reporting again on more of the attacks on vote by mail, even though we know vote by mail is safe and it is easy. All the president's statements about vote by mail, what they're doing for us, Chuck, is they're making our case in our litigation. We have a case right here in Wisconsin, and it's the DNC and the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. And we're trying to make sure that the judge for this November allows absentee ballots to count as long as they are postmarked by Election Day, which is not the law, but which the court granted that relief in the April primary. And frankly, every time the president opens his mouth, he makes our case even stronger and stronger, because he's been very clear that the post office will not be your friend. So when you ask me about what I think about a lot right now, I'm thinking about how we win in November. I think we're going to have a great convention this week. We've got an A-team of people, and it will be different. But you're going to hear from our stars of the party, and you're going to hear from some of the unsung heroes of the party, people whose names you've never heard of until this week, but people who will inspire you this week. And then we're going to get to making sure that everybody can exercise their right to vote. We owe it to Elijah Cummings. We owe it to John Lewis to make sure that the right to vote, which is so critical, is exercised by everyone.
David Plouffe said to me earlier today that he hopes that, in addition to using the convention to, certainly, present a united front to the American people, have Joe Biden use his speech as a way to start making people visualize what a President Biden would look like. But one of the other things he said is he hopes you guys spend the week teaching people how to plan for their vote.
Absolutely. And here is the most important thing we say when we're talking about voting is make a plan. And step 1 in making a plan is go to iwillvote.com. Doesn't matter where you live, type your name and your zip code, and it'll give you your information. It'll tell you whether you're registered to vote. If you're not, it'll tell you how to do it. And then make a plan. Go early. If you can get your ballot on September 15th, then get your ballot then. Voting ends on November 3rd. Doesn't start on November 3rd. In Arizona, voting starts on September 14th. And we know that. And we've been organizing early, making sure people know what they're doing. And so when people make a plan, and when they make that plan early, and when they give themselves time to exercise their right to vote, and if they want to vote in person, they should have that choice. If they want to vote early in person, we should make sure we have the maximum number of days so that we can practice social distancing and not have long lines. And if they want to vote by mail like Donald Trump does, we should make sure they can do that. And so we have the most robust voter protection operation, the Biden campaign and the DNC, that we've ever had, and that's because the circumstances demand it. And so does the ecosystem. We are going to fight like hell to make sure that everyone who wants to vote can exercise that right to vote.
Tom Perez, is Milwaukee going to host the convention in 2024 as a make good?
that's going to be up to my successor. I will not be the DNC chair in 2024, and I wouldn't want to tie his or her hands. Here's what I will say, though. The city of Milwaukee has been a spectacular partner. The state of Wisconsin has been a spectacular partner. It's been an honor to work with them. It continues to be that honor. That's why I'm here in Milwaukee now. We got a lot of work to do. It starts in 2 minutes.
Well, Tom Perez, you got to go be a chair, an executive producer, a showrunner, all these other things. So I'll let you go. Chairman Tom Perez, thanks for coming on and sharing your perspective with us. As we get ready for the start of this convention, still with us, Casey Hunt, Joshua Johnson, and Neera Tanden. And Casey, again, the logistics of this may be just as intriguing at first to people than the substance, but I have a feeling as long as the logistics don't get in the way, we could have a lot more people tuning into this. When you look at interest in the election in our poll, you know, I know there's a lot of predictions all over the map about how much attention these conventions are going to get. I think it could be a lot higher than we're thinking.
Yeah, as you pointed out on Meet the Press over the weekend, I mean, these numbers are closer to where people are normally engaged in October, you know, just weeks before they expect to go to the polls. And there are a lot of reasons for that, Chuck. Suddenly our political system of governance and who's in charge is making a bigger difference, material difference in people's lives that they can see and feel every day. That may be true under more usual circumstances, but it is just very acute now. Also, I mean, haven't you already binge-watched all your shows on Netflix? I mean, what are people doing after months being stuck at home? I mean, I might turn it on if I was, you know, somebody who didn't obviously do this in the course of my job anyway. But I think there are a lot of dynamics here that will make this potentially different. And, you know, as a television professional, that half the battle in terms of doing good TV is eliminating distractions. So that's what I think they're going to have to be going for here. The one question I do have, Chuck, is the security of this. And I talked to Tom Perez a little bit about this earlier this week, and he was very quick to say, yes, exactly, cybersecurity, quick to say, you know, we've got that where it's all good. But as we know, the party committees have been certainly targets in the past. So just something to keep an eye on.
Joshua, what's a speech you're looking forward to tonight that we haven't talked about?
Speech I'm looking forward to tonight is, I mean, Michelle Obama. I'm not sure why you want to get me in trouble by saying anything other than Michelle Obama. Other than
Michelle Obama.
Okay, you needed that proviso. You didn't give me a proviso. I'm interested in seeing the speeches from the Republicans who are at the convention. I think that the GOP in the convention in 2016 tried to do a version of what the Democrats are going to do tonight with having like Peter Thiel speak and Michael Bloomberg speak and people who aren't straight ahead, dyed-in-the-wool kind of conventional members of the GOP coalition saying that I'm for Donald Trump too. That's going to be interesting, the way that they paint that picture. Tom Perez has been working for the last few years to kind of prep for this moment in terms of being able to do more coalition building and to have the everyday issues of everyday Americans make the headlines in terms of what the DNC is about. But that larger coalition of how you knit John Kasich and Bernie Sanders together is fascinating. I mean, if you look at the draft of the party platform saying that we must guarantee health care not as a privilege for some, but as a right for every single American, that's out of Bernie Sanders' mouth. That's his influence. So I'm interested to see how you knit all these people together to make one cohesive movement for Joe Biden. I'm not yet sold that it'll happen, but it might.
Neera Tanden, what is tomorrow's headline in your perfect world if this convention, if this first night goes well?
Well, I know what it will be. It will be whatever Michelle Obama says, but it could well be. I think it'll be this issue, which is Donald Trump is so polarizing a figure that he has actually brought together John Kasich and Bernie Sanders in the joint political project of electing Joe Biden. And I think you'll see a variety of Republicans who will make the leadership claim, the argument that Joe Biden is the best leader. And I think that's what we'll hopefully see tomorrow.
Well, we're going to find out a real test for the DNC in the next few seconds, because I'm saying goodbye officially. Casey, Joshua, Neera, thank you all. Thanks for being with us this hour. Night one of the DNC is supposed to start in 10 seconds. So if it does, then I will see you here tomorrow night or at 10 o'clock on the NBC broadcast airwaves. And if not, I'll see you in a few minutes.
Good evening. I'm Eva Longoria Baston, and welcome to the 2020 Democratic National Convention, Uniting America. Every 4 years, we come together to reaffirm our democracy. This year, we've come to save it. It's going to take all of us. So tonight, we stand together, united by the values we cherish: decency, respect, justice, and the opportunity to rise up. We always hear that line about this being the most important election of our lifetimes, but this year, it really is. The past few months have tested us all. We've lost more than 170,000 family members and friends to COVID. This tragedy is compounded by the loss of jobs and income. But it's not just the past few months. The past 4 years have left us as a nation diminished and divided. And yet, in the middle of the fear and sorrow and the uncertainty, people have come together because they know we are better than this. America is better than this. And so we choose to act, inspired by the 3 sacred words that breathed life into our nation: we the people.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, let's go.
Come on now.
Okay, we ready?
I think I learned this in middle school.
Or 5th grade. Can I say this in Spanish?
So should I read just this line or the whole thing?
Justice.
Tranquility.
Liberty.
Liberty. Liberty.
Let's do this.
We the people.
We the people.
We the people.
Nosotros. We the people.
We the people. We the people of the United States.
De los Estados Unidos.
In order to form a more perfect union.
Establish justice.
Ensure domestic tranquility.
Provide for the common defense.
Promote the general welfare.
And secure the blessings of liberty.
To ourselves.
And our posterity.
Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
We the people.
We the people.
We the people.
We the people.
We the people. We the people. We the people.
We the people of the United States.
We the people call the 48th Quadrennial Democratic National Convention to order.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hello, my name is Reverend Gabriel Salguero. Let us pray. Almighty God, we confess that our nation needs you and has always needed you. We pray for your blessing upon all of us, Republicans, Independents, and Democrats. As we strive to form a more perfect union, we pray for your strength, guidance, and wisdom. Lord, we recognize that we are living in challenging times that call us to live up to the highest angels of our national character. As we confront the turbulent winds of a global pandemic, economic uncertainty, and civil discord, may your gracious hand lead us to the peaceful shores of love, justice, and civility. Help us, O Lord, to be ever mindful of the most vulnerable among us, from our golden generation to our youngest children, desde nuestros inmigrantes to our veterans, from our healthcare workers to our school teachers. Give us a heart of compassion and grace. This nation, from Miami to Minneapolis and from Portland to El Paso, ask you to shepherd us to a hope-filled vision that does justice, ama la misericordia, and walks humbly before you. I pray this in the matchless name of Jesus. Amen.
Welcome to our convention across America. We had hoped to gather in one place, but instead we figured out a safe and responsible way to come together to share our ideas and talk about the future of our country. And that's the kind of leadership we need right now. That's the kind of leadership that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will bring to the White House. So during the next 4 nights, we will gather safely from our homes to listen, to learn, to be inspired, to act, to vote, and to build that more perfect union. I am honored to be with you this evening. I'm here tonight as a 9th-generation Texan, as a daughter of a veteran and a teacher, as a mother, as a voter, and as a patriot. I share Joe Biden's belief that the story of America is one of ordinary people coming together to do extraordinary things. And at our best, our country rewards hard work. We celebrate diversity. We look out for each other, and we lift one another up. So tonight, we're going to begin with the simple kindness we've been extending to each other a lot lately. We're going to check in with folks around the country and ask, how are you doing? As many of you know, small businesses employ half of all U.S. workers. Tonight we have Scott. Scott, you are a small business owner from Swarthmore, Pennsylvania. Small businesses have been hit so hard in this crisis, so many small businesses. How are you doing? How are you managing?
Well, you know, it's been rough. Rough is a nice word to say it. My wife and I, 31 years ago, began our business. And quite honestly, over all these years, we faced some adversity and challenges, but to be honest, nothing like we are today. We've literally had to reinvent our business several times since the beginning of the year, just to stay afloat. And you know, our revenue, for example, is off about 40%. We have half of the employees that we had pre-COVID. And, you know, our customers are a little scared. Our employees are sometimes afraid to come to work because of the COVID. And to be honest with you, I'm just frustrated. I don't understand how we got here. We are the greatest nation in the world. And it just seems to me that, you know, maybe if we just came together on this one issue alone, maybe as Americans and being united, we can overcome.
Yeah. Thank you, Scott, for sharing your story. I'm sure many small business owners feel the same way that you're feeling now. We wish you the best for your business and, of course, for your family. Now I'd like to turn to Marley Diaz, who is 15 years old from West Orange, New Jersey. She is a literary activist and author, and she is the founder of 1,000 Black Girl Books. Marley, so many young people are struggling with the changes due to COVID. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. You know, I feel better every day. I feel more hopeful. I thought this was going to be a few weeks at first where I wouldn't see my friends and I would just stick it out. But obviously, as it's grown longer, I really want to focus on activism and still spreading important messages, given the fact that I can't go out. So I started doing virtual read-alouds online, which has been so fun, getting to interact and meet new kids and encourage and promote the joy that we can find in reading and in learning. It's also super fun to see teenagers like me going on social media and talking about social issues and injustices that they care about, because sometimes you don't have that space in school. So I hope that a year from now, you know, when we get to go back and be safe and be protected, that we will still have these conversations and still have a new possibility in a new world.
Yes, thank you so much, Marley. You're such an inspiration. I don't think I was doing half of what you're doing at 15, and I love seeing how brave and creative your generation is to creating change. So thank you. Thank you so much for your work. Let's check in with Rick. Rick, you are a farmer from Volant, Pennsylvania. Your farm has been in your family for generations. What have the trade wars and the pandemic done to your family's life work?
Well, first of all, I'd like to offer the Trump family our condolences for his loss. Getting back to the business side of it, the trade war was it was a real stressful and truly a devastating effect on a farm. Most probably what people can relate to mostly in agriculture is soybean tariffs. And then whenever you compound the effects of the COVID-19 virus, nobody could have prevented that. It's a shame our leadership misinformed people like myself and the country on what was coming down the road. You know, my biggest concern is that if these trends continue with this type of leadership, I will be the last generation farming this farm.
Yeah, it's a scary thought, and I'm sure a lot of farmers feel the same way.
You know, I don't have the answers, but past experiences, if something doesn't work for you, it's time for a change. And that's why I'm supporting Joe Biden all the way.
Well, thank you so much. Rick, I couldn't agree with you more. You know, we need meaningful change and leadership that will support family farms like yours. So we wish you the best. Thank you for sharing your story. Finally, let's hear from Michelle from my home state of Texas. Michelle, you are a school nurse and a mother in El Paso. How are you preparing for the new school year?
Hi, Eva. Well, we've already started school, but it is a little challenging because every day something seems to change. We start one way one day and we have to change it the next day. And I know that right now it's kind of sad not to see the kiddos when we're back, but I know that that will change. We're going to have to adapt and persevere. But honestly, right now, all I can think about is keeping my kiddos safe. I know back in March, you know, we had them at home and we were doing okay, but now they're wanting us to take them back to school. And it's a little scary with all the uprise and COVID cases. And so I just want to say that I am committed to take care of my family, my students, and all my staff at my school. I will do whatever it takes to ensure that we are all ready to go back to school safe and healthy. And I know that I am optimistic to move forward with our life, and Joe Biden will be the one to take us there. I just want to say for everyone to please remember to wash their hands and wear their mask, because we're all in this together.
Thank you, Michelle. I think there's nothing more difficult for us as moms than to see our children suffer. And so I think you're doing a great job of guiding them through this very difficult time. And thank you for the work you do as a nurse. It's truly heroic. I really enjoyed talking to all of you. I think I have one last question. Do you believe that change is coming? Do you believe that better days are ahead?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, thank you for taking the time to speak with us and sharing your thoughts. You are the we in We the People, and you are who this convention is about.
In 1776, the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident. These words are the basis for the American creed: equality, equity, fairness, decency. America didn't live up to that promise for most of the people at the time, the people of color, for women, but we were born of an idea that every single solitary person, given half a chance, no matter where they're from, given half a chance, there's not a single thing they cannot do if they work at it. Nothing's beyond their capacity.
We had hoped to have our convention in the City of Festivals, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, this year. Of course, we're not able to do that, but we'll be hearing from several of Wisconsin's leaders throughout this convention, starting with Congresswoman Gwen Moore.
Hi, I'm Gwen Moore, and it's my honor to represent Milwaukee in Congress and to kick off the 2020 Democratic Convention. Oh, I sure wish you all were here in the city of Milwaukee, which takes its name from the languages of the first peoples, interpreted as good land and gathering place by the waters. This is a city where blood was shed for labor rights, where a fugitive slave was freed from prison, where women's right to vote was first ratified. But today, we gather virtually. However, we gather unified in spirit, unified in our values and purpose to heal divisions and together move the nation confidently into a prosperous, inclusive future. Oh, what better way to gather than all across America to nominate my beloved friend, Joe Biden, to be 46th President of the United States of America, with my VIP, VP nominee, Sister Kamala Harris by his side. Tonight, we are gathered to reclaim the soul of America. So if you're ready to come together, America, text JOIN to 30330. Thank you. I love you all, and God bless you.
Can't see nothing in front of me. Can't see nothing coming up behind. Make my way through this darkness. I can't feel nothing but this chain that binds me. Lost track of how far I've gone, how high I've climbed. On my back's a 60-pound stone. On my shoulder, half mile line. Come on up for the horizon. Come on up and lay your heads in mine. Come on up for the horizon. Come on up for the horizon tonight. Left the house this morning. Bells are ringing through the air. I was swearing across of my calling. Home wheels of fire come rolling down here. Come on up for the horizon. Come on up and lay your hands in mine. Come on up for the horizon. Come on up for the horizon tonight. La 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 spirits above and behind me. Faces gone like ice, burning bright. May the precious blood find me. For as I stand before you, I I see you there in the garden.
We have to let them know who we are, what we stand for. We choose hope over fear, truth over lies, and yes, unity over division. It's time for us to lift our heads up, open our hearts, remember who we are. We are the United States of America. I mean it. There's not a single thing we cannot do if we do it together.
us calling ourselves the United States of America feels like it's pretty wrong right now. I'm fairly ashamed to say it, but I'm one of many who voted for the current president, Donald Trump. I challenge you to think back to what made you vote for Donald Trump in 2016. I know I sure have, and I've registered as a Democrat for the first time in my life. I'm doing that because I think this election is bigger than any political party. What I think, in light of current events, if nothing else, we need more than anything is a proven leader. Donald Trump's rhetoric it's divisive, it's dangerous. It's also really difficult to vote for someone who essentially has zero platform right now, 4 months out from the election. Joe Biden, on the other hand, has a very detailed plan. Things like unity, education, climate preservation, racial inequality, and even health care. We have a chance right now to look ourselves in the mirror and go vote for a proven leader with a history of caring about others and truly putting all Americans first.
Our nation is facing a lot right now, and over the next 4 nights, we're going to cover it all. But tonight, we're going to talk about 3 specific crises we face: the pandemic, an economic downturn, and an ongoing systemic racial injustice. But we're not just going to focus on what's wrong. We're going to talk about how to make it right. When peaceful protesters were tear-gassed across from the White House, our next speaker stood up, stood strong, and turned that place into the Black Lives Matter Plaza in their honor. Please welcome Mayor Muriel Bowser.
Hello, I'm Muriel Bowser, Mayor of Washington, D.C. The story of our nation's capital is a story of reckoning. It was here that John Lewis and Dr. King spoke on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. It was here that millions of women and men flooded the streets for the Women's March. It was here that just weeks ago, Americans donned face masks and safely and peacefully protested the death of George Floyd. But while we were peacefully protesting, Donald Trump was plotting. He stood in front of one of our most treasured houses of worship and held a Bible for a photo op. He sent troops in camouflage into our streets. He sent tear gas into the air and federal helicopters, too. I knew if he did this to D.C., he would do it to your city or your town. And that's when I said enough. I said enough for every Black and brown American who has experienced injustice. Enough for every American who believes in justice. But I said enough for another reason, too. I have a 2-year-old daughter. And I want her to grow up in an America where she's not scared to walk to the store, an America where she's safe behind the doors of her own home, an America where the president doesn't fan the flames of racism and looks out for all of us. So I created Black Lives Matter Plaza right behind me as a place where we could come together to say enough. And by coming together this November to elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, we will say next. Because we can't just paint those words behind me. We can't just say those words. We have to live those words. We have to undo the laws and systems that have codified racism for far too long. But we have to do something, too. Each and every one of us challenge our own biases. If we see something, do something. Together, we can turn this reckoning into a reimagining of a nation where we, the people, means all the people. There were a few people who stood on this very balcony as thousands of people peacefully protested in this city. One was our next vice president, my sister Kamala Harris. The others were members of George Floyd's family, who I'm honored to introduce now.
My brother George was selfless. He always made sacrifices for his family, friends, and even complete strangers. George had a giving spirit, a spirit that has shown up on streets around our nation and around the world. People of all races, all ages, all genders, all backgrounds, peacefully protesting in the name of love and unity. It's a fitting legacy for our brother, but George should be alive today. Breonna Taylor should be alive today. Ahmaud Arbery should be alive today. Eric Garner should be alive today. Stephon Clark, Tatiana Jefferson, Sandra Bland, they should all be alive today. So it's up to us to carry on the fight for justice. Our actions will be their legacies. We must always find ourselves in what John Lewis called good trouble. For the names we do not know, the faces we'll never see, those who can't mourn because their murders didn't go viral. Please join me in a moment of silence to honor George and the many other souls we lost to hate and injustice. And when this moment ends, let's make sure we never stop saying their names.
Hoping for a life more sweeter. Instead, I'm just a story repeating. Why do I feel skin dark as night? Can you feel peace with those judging eyes? I thought we moved on from the darker days. Did the words of the king disappear in the air like a butterfly? Somebody should hand you a felony. Cause you stole from me my chance to be. Hoping for a life more sweeter. Instead, I'm just a story repeating. Why do I feel skin dark as night? Can't feel peace with those judging eyes. The tears of my mother rain, rain over me. My sisters and my brothers sang, sang over me. And I wish I had another day, but it's just another day. Hoping for a life more sweeter. Instead, I'm just a story repeating. Why do I feel skin dark as night? Can't feel peace with those judging eyes. The tears of my mother rain, rain over me. My sisters and my brothers sang, sang over me. And I wish I had another day, but it's just another day. Hoping for a life more sweeter.
Thank you, Leon Bridges, whose song Sweeter featured Terrace Martin, a song written after George Floyd's murder. You know, we have to ask ourselves, how do we, the people, take the protest and turn them into progress? How do we take the changes we're seeing in the hearts and minds of people and translate it into real and lasting change in people's lives? We need to address the economic inequalities that this virus has exposed and worsened, and we need to solve the testing and healthcare disparities that have led to people of color dying from COVID at higher rates than white people, and we need to make it easier for Americans to vote. We have a lot to do, and to do this, we need community action, we need Congress that can have power to do it, and we need a president who understands that this is the moment.
The moment has come for our nation to deal with systemic racism, to deal with the growing economic inequity that exists in our nation, to deal with the denial of the promise of this nation made to so many. You know, I've said from the outset of this election that we're in the battle for the soul of this nation. And we are in the battle for the soul of this nation. What we believe, and maybe most importantly, who we want to be, it's all at stake. That's truer today than it's ever been, at least in my lifetime. And it's this urgency, it's in this urgency, we can find a path forward.
Hey, everybody, how are you? Thanks for doing this.
Great.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Jamira, tell the rest of the folks a little about your background.
I started doing activism when I was 15. It was at the intersection of knowing both the perpetrator and a victim. My brother Andre was shot and killed in Philadelphia. And it made me realize that I had a responsibility, almost a collective responsibility, to ensure that that didn't happen to other young people. And I think that's what's missing in America right now is our collective responsibility to each other and to realize that the person down the street or around the corner or even across the country, that we have a responsibility to ensure that we're making sure that they're safe, they have access to education, and that in all, we're creating a world in which their differences are celebrated as well as protected under the law.
Mayor, how are you prioritizing the many things you have to do as we try to tackle in a way that we haven't before systemic racism in the city?
It really is about economic empowerment, because if people are lifted out of poverty and they are given an opportunity to feel a stake in their own future, that goes a long way. We're also challenging, all kinds of institutions, from corporations to community-based organizations, to think about what they can do better to end systemic racism and make sure that we're uplifting the quality of life in communities, but also the voices of people that traditionally don't have a seat at the table.
The president's talking about defunding the post office and mail-in voting. I mean, what do you think we should be doing, Mr. President?
Well, first of all, we have to change the public discourse around voting. It should be seen as a democratic thing to do, the most patriotic thing we can do, and not a partisan exercise. Secondly, how do we open up access to voting so we can address some of the systemic problems? Not only should we reauthorize the Voting Rights Act, but we have to go further. Most importantly, voting should be seen as a constitutional right that's guaranteed, and with that level of sight that all citizens can be assured that they can have unfettered access without being suppressed.
This is a watershed moment, and we can't lose this moment. We have got to have action at the national level. We have got to have congressional action. We cannot have 18,000 police departments, and in 2020 have police departments still allowing the use of a knee on a man's neck in George Floyd. A lot of us were shocked, and I think what gives me hope is that police officers were shocked. Police officers have spoken out, and we're hopeful that we'll have some national standards as it relates to policing, use of force, a national database, abolishment of prohibition on a national standard in terms of chokeholds, and that we actually use the death of George Floyd and others to actually make policing take it to the next level, which is what everyone wants, including all the good cops that are out there, that thankfully there are more of them than there are bad cops.
Most cops are good, but the fact is the bad ones have to be identified and prosecuted and out, period. Gwen, how are you doing?
Oh, well, I'm doing pretty well as can be expected.
I'm sure that
the words of George Floyd, "I can't breathe," were not new to you, and they echo in your mind every single day. And 6 years ago, when your son died. But we can't let this keep happening. What do you think the next thing we have to do, Gwen?
Well, first of all, I know when my son was murdered, there was a big uprising, but then it settled down. We can't let things settle down. We have to go to the politicians and we have to hold their feet to the fire, because otherwise the big uprising is not going to mean a lot. So I'm just asking that if you become the president, that you make sure that we get national law as well as state and local law, especially when it comes to police brutality, because that has been an age-old problem.
Well, I may be kidding myself, but I think the people are ready. I think people are ready. We just got to keep pushing. We can't let up. But thank you for what you're doing. I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Racism structurally, individually, and systematically is real.
Black, brown, no matter what you look like, you should not ever be fearful of your life due to the color of your skin.
What I want to see in the next president of the United States is someone who's fair, who believes in equal justice under the law. I want him to lead us through this revolution that we're experiencing right now.
Joe Biden is a healer and he's a unifier. He will fight for the Black Lives Matter movement.
Undo, remove, tear down the remnants of structural and systematic racism in this country.
The systemic injustices that exist, things that our nation has overlooked, that need to be addressed.
We need to stand on our platform and introduce legislation that makes this platform felt from coast to coast.
And I know that Joe Biden is the person to restore the values that we hold so near and dear to our hearts.
I have a 10-year-old son. I want to make sure that there is a world that's left better for him.
Good evening. I'm Congressman Jim Clyburn here in historic. Good evening. I'm Congressman Jim Clyburn here in historic Charleston, South Carolina. 6 months ago, I stood not far from here and endorsed Joe Biden to be our 46th president. It was a decision I made with my feet firmly planted in this community. This community, where 80% of African Americans in this country can claim an ancestor who arrived on these shores in bondage, a few blocks from here over at Gaston's Wharf. This community that is still healing from the wounds we received when the white supremacists entered Emmanuel AME Church and murdered 9 black parishioners as they studied the Bible together. The ground beneath our feet is seeded with pain that is both old and new. But from that soil, we always find a way to grow together. Earlier this summer, the city of Charleston removed a statue honoring John C. Calhoun, an honored advocate of slavery. And construction is underway on the International African American Museum at Gadsden's Wharf. Much like the country as a whole, we are stepping out from the shadows of our past and beginning to lay the groundwork for a more just future. It won't be easy. We can only succeed if we move forward together. So we will need a president who sees unifying people as a requirement of the job. A president who understands the true meaning of community and how to build it through trust and humility. And with so many families experiencing loss in this pandemic, lost jobs, lost loved ones, and lost confidence in the president to keep us safe, we need a president who understands both profound loss and what it takes to bounce back. But more important than his firsthand experience with loss and hardship is his ability to translate that perspective into policy and solutions and prioritize hard-working people and persistent poverty counties over partisan politics or personal gain. That's why I stand with Joe And while he will always be an adopted son of South Carolina, Joe Biden is as good a man as he is a leader. I have said before and wish to reiterate tonight, we know Joe, but more importantly, Joe knows us.
I am Kevin. I do a lot of things in life, but the thing I'm most proud of is I am a TAPS military mentor, and that's how I spend the majority of my time, post-Marine Corps.
Building memories like the ones we build together is the single best thing I do with my time. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your lives and sharing the journeys for the past decade.
We've got about 500 kids and family members and mentors, and we're all packed into this very large ballroom. And all of a sudden, the back door opens up, and in walks Joe Biden. I had almost an out-of-body experience because he surprised us all. You know, I like to think I'm decent at reading people. From my time in the Marine Corps, my time as an intel officer, my time as a drill instructor, my time studying psychology. He was being real. I mean, you can't fake that kind of a smile. He was genuinely happy to see these kids and to spend time with them. It's easy to lose faith in humanity, especially today. There's a lot of polarization, leaves a lot of room for a lot of hope. And it's hard to articulate real character when you see it. You know, policies are great, and we need sound policies as well, which he also has those because he's got the chops, right? But it's almost like none of that matters if you don't have the character. This is a very unprecedented and challenging time that requires an unprecedented and courageous leader. We need someone with the courage to do what's necessary and what's right to strive towards that more perfect union. That's Joe Biden. I know Joe because he cares about everybody else before himself.
You know what else Joe knows? Joe knows about pandemics. In 2014, he helped stop the spread of Ebola and brought the world together to keep it contained. And after that success, knowing this would happen again, Vice President Biden and President Obama assembled a pandemic playbook to make sure that America was prepared and protected. The Trump administration disbanded the pandemic response team that was given to them. Americans have died and lost their livelihoods because of it. We, the people, deserve a president who believes in science, that recognizes the threat of COVID, who has a plan to get us through it. And that is Joe Biden. We're grateful that across the country there are responsible leaders who are stepping up. One of them provided clear direction and memorable PowerPoints, New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Hello. Today's Monday, day 170. New Yorkers were ground zero for the COVID virus and have gone from one of the highest infection rates on the globe to one of the lowest. We climbed the impossible mountain, and right now we are on the other side. We did it with the kindness and assistance of so many. New Yorkers want to thank everyone who came to our aid, 30,000 Americans who volunteered to come here to help in our hour of need. Your love gave us the strength to carry on. We went through hell, but we have learned much. We know that our problems go beyond the COVID virus. COVID is the symptom, not the illness. Our nation is in crisis, and in many ways, COVID is just a metaphor. A virus attacks when the body is weak and when it cannot defend itself. Over these past few years, America's body politic has been weakened. The divisions have been growing deeper, the anti-Semitism, the anti-Latino, the anti-immigrant fervor, the racism in Charlottesville, where the KKK didn't even bother to wear their hoods, and in Minnesota, where the life was squeezed from Mr. Floyd. Only a strong body can fight off the virus, and America's divisions weakened it. Donald Trump didn't create the initial division. The division created Trump. He only made it worse. Our collective strength is exercised through government. It is, in effect, our immune system. And our current federal government is dysfunctional and incompetent. It couldn't fight off the virus. In fact, it didn't even see it coming. The European virus infected the Northeast while the White House was still fixated on China. The virus had been attacking us for months before they even knew it was here. We saw the failure of a government that tried to deny the virus, then tried to ignore it, and then tried to politicize it. The failed federal government that watched New York get ambushed by their negligence and then watched New York suffer, but all through it learned absolutely nothing. So today, 6 months after it began, the nation is still unprepared. And we now face a second threat, but this time not from Mother Nature. This is a man-made threat by our own negligence. We now see the virus ricocheting across the country, from one state to another. Today, we trail the world in defeating COVID. We have over 5 million cases. Americans learned a critical lesson, how vulnerable we are when we are divided, and how many lives can be lost when our government is incompetent. But we learned something else, my friends. We saw the negative, but we also saw the positive. As they proved their way failed, we proved that our way succeeded. That America can still rise to the occasion. We can put our differences aside and find commonality. Government can tell the truth and can build trust. We can judge by content of character rather than color of skin. We can care for one another. That Americans can work together and forge community and a competent government. That, of course, we will wear masks because we are smart and because I care about you and because you care about me. Of course, we will socially distance because staying away shows how close we actually are. Yes, we will set up testing and tracing and do whatever we need to do to mobilize to win this battle because we are America. We win wars, and we are the greatest country on the globe. And for all the pain and all the tears, our way worked, and it was beautiful. We showed that our better angels are strong and that Americans will rise to their call. We saw that even at the end of the day, even if it is a long day, that love wins. Americans' eyes have been opened, and we have seen in this crisis the truth that government matters and leadership matters. And it determines whether we thrive and grow or whether we live or die. Now we need a leader as good as our people, a leader who appeals to the best within us, not the worst, a leader who can unify, not divide, a leader who can bring us up, not tear us down. I know that man. I've worked with that man. I've seen his talent. I've seen his strength. I've seen his pain, and I've seen his heart. That man is Joe Biden. Joe Biden is what I call America tough, tough in the best way, tough that is smart, united, disciplined, and loving. Joe Biden can restore the soul of America. And that's exactly what our country needs today. Thank you.
And now we'll hear from Kristen Urquiza.
Hi, I'm Kristen Urquiza. I'm one of the many who has lost a loved one to COVID. My dad, Mark Anthony Urquiza, should be here today, but he isn't. He had faith in Donald Trump. He voted for him, listened to him, believed him and his mouthpieces when they said that coronavirus was under control and going to disappear, that it was okay to end social distancing rules before it was safe, and that if you had no underlying health conditions, you'd probably be fine. So in late May, after the stay-at-home order was lifted in Arizona, my dad went to a karaoke bar with his friends. A few weeks later, he was put on a ventilator. And after 5 agonizing days, he died alone in the ICU with a nurse holding his hand. My dad was a healthy 65-year-old. His only pre-existing condition was trusting Donald Trump, and for that, he paid with his life. I am not alone. Once I told my story, a lot of people reached out to me to share theirs. They asked me to help them keep their communities safe, especially communities of color, which have been disproportionately affected. They asked me, a normal person, to help because Donald Trump won't. The coronavirus has made it clear that there are 2 Americas, the America that Donald Trump lives in and the America that my father died in. Enough is enough. Donald Trump may not have caused the coronavirus, but his dishonesty and his irresponsible actions made it so much worse. We need a leader who has a national, coordinated, data-driven response to stop this pandemic from claiming more lives and to safely reopen the country. We need a leader who will step in on day one and do his job, to care. One of the last things that my father said to me was that he felt betrayed by the likes of Donald Trump. And so when I cast my vote for Joe Biden, I will do it for my dad.
Thank you, Kristen, for sharing your story. Our nation grieves for your father and all those who we've lost to this virus. It's a toll that hasn't fallen equally on us. People of color have been disproportionately affected, dying at greater rates than white Americans, but we can honor all of those we've lost by giving Joe Biden and Kamala Harris the opportunity to put in place a real national plan that tests and tracks, that makes sure that access to a vaccine will be fair, and turns the full power of our government toward making sure we have the supplies and technology and people, scientists and public health officials and contact tracers. We need to stop this. So right now, let's hear from a champion for our frontline workers, who also happens to be an Olympic champion and a World Cup champion, Megan Rapinoe.
Hi, everybody. My name is Megan Rapinoe, and I have the distinct honor today to host a conversation with 4 of our frontline workers here in America. We should rename them heroes, absolutely. Trung Lee, can you tell us a little bit about how you're doing during this time?
So early on, when the government was still trying to figure out proper protocols to protect frontline workers, I had unfortunately contracted COVID through patient contact and was isolated by myself for 2 weeks. So total isolation, no contact. Once I recovered, luckily, I went back to the front lines to continue to take care of the sick. And what got me originally was watching people die alone. There were no visitors allowed. Everyone was totally isolated. And I knew how that felt because for 2 weeks, that was me. Not knowing if you were going to wake up, not knowing if you were going to make it, who you were going to talk to, if you can say goodbye. This was people's moms, dads, brothers, sisters, sons, daughters, all dying alone. And we know there's a round 2 coming, and mentally, physically, emotionally, I don't know how many of us on the front lines are going to survive that second round.
Dr. Bradley, what effects are you seeing inside your hospital doors of the inaction of the Trump administration when it comes to this COVID response?
It's heavy. I mean, I've left the emergency department in tears, and so have a lot of my colleagues. People are exhausted, and we're looking at the tsunami that's coming this winter with COVID and influenza. And I think all of us are wondering, how is our system not going to just collapse? Because if we're not there, when people come with their broken arms or they come with their heart attacks and strokes or their appendicitis, we're not going to be there.
What were you seeing on the front lines in those very early days that you knew it wasn't going to magically disappear? Did you think it was a hoax then?
Oh, absolutely. We knew that this was not a hoax. We were certain of it. All of us knew from experience back in 2009 with the swine flu. We knew what a pandemic would look like. We knew that we needed to have the tools and the resources and the plans in place. But then we have the ineptitude and the lack of leadership from this administration. I've seen the worst of the worst. Not only have I answered thousands of calls of people that are sick, but people that are dying.
Michelle, tell us a little bit about how it's been for you on the front lines, what your specific role is.
As a union nurse, I've been primarily more in the forefront on advocating that our healthcare workers and our patients get the support and the PPE that they need. You know, 10 years ago, I responded to the disaster in Haiti. We were working in a tent hospital after the earthquake. But, you know, the first time that I ever feared for my life and my family's walking into work was in my own country We have the money, we have the means, we have the resources in this country. We are deeply lacking leadership and somebody who cares. Trump has made it perfectly clear how he feels. And we need a president who cares. That's Joe Biden.
Dr. Bradley Dreyfus, Aldo Martinez, Michelle Boyle, and Chung Lee, I can't thank you enough. The American people are forever indebted to you, to your work and your sacrifice and just you showing up every single day and giving everything you have. And thank you again for all of the work you do on the front line. There's no way we could ever repay you. So thank you very much.
Millions of people and veterans and senior citizens rely on the postal system for prescription medicines, for their checks.
Having the Postal Service to deliver my prescriptions became even more comforting when the COVID-19 virus hit us here in the United States.
However, now, with Donald Trump in office and his attempts to undermine the United States Postal Service, we are extremely concerned.
This administration's decision not to provide the necessary funding to the United States Postal Service is appalling.
I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. Voting by mail is our only realistic option.
In no way do I want my 11 grandchildren to grow up in a world where this kind of suppression exists.
I'm Sarah Gideon, and I'm running to represent Maine in the U.S. Senate. Every day, I see the caring and resilient spirit that will get us through this crisis. Americans are looking out for one another. It's time we had leadership in Washington that did the same. With Joe Biden in the White House and a Democratic Senate, I know we can build back our economy and our communities even stronger. But tonight, I am here to welcome someone who has strong ties to our state and is here in Maine with me. She is reminding all of us to keep fighting through with her song that she's performing, Back in My Body. Please help me welcome someone who's an inspiration to all of us and one of my favorite artists, Maggie Rogers.
I was stopped in London when I felt it coming down. Crashing all around me with a great triumphant sound. Like the dam was breaking and my mind came rushing in. I was stopped in London, oh, I was awakening. I was over in Paris when I almost ran away. 2 times round the block before I decided to stay. Puffed along a cigarette that went and made me sick. Spent another day pretending I was over it.
Unlike any we've ever seen.
This is a battle for the soul of the United States of America.
In the midst of a pandemic, the Democrats take on Donald Trump and make their case for winning back the White House.
The president's supposed to care, to lead, to take responsibility.
We'll hear this week from Barack Obama, Bill and Hillary Clinton, Jill Biden, and from the candidates themselves.
We have a chance to choose a better future.
From NBC News, the Democratic National Convention.
Here are Lester Holt and Savannah Guthrie.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to NBC News Live coverage of the 2020 Democratic National Convention.
Good evening, everybody. The pandemic has forced both parties to change their convention plans in a big way. The Democrats are up first, and they are going all virtual tonight.
And already tonight, we've seen speakers share remarks from remote locations across the country, many of them in their own homes. And many of the speeches are coming in from feeds provided by the DNC, either live or on tape. Right now, you're seeing some of that feed. We've seen music, we've seen stirring tributes, the sort of things we would typically see in a regular convention.
But what's a convention without big speeches? And we'll have them tonight. Senator Bernie Sanders will take the mic in just a few moments from now. And the headliner of the evening, former First Lady Michelle Obama, she taped her remarks before tonight's event. We're also going to dip in and give you some analysis about this convention week, as well as what you, the voter, needs to know ahead of the November election. The first live speaker we're expecting in this hour is Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer. She's expected to appear any moment now, and I'll focus on one of the big themes tonight, the coronavirus pandemic.
Over the course of the night, the Democrats will also be talking about the tens of millions of Americans who are unemployed right now, also the racial injustice that has plagued our country. We have our team of correspondents and analysts in place to cover it all. Before Governor Whitmer takes the mic, let's check in quickly with NBC News political director and moderator of Meet the Press, Chuck Todd. Chuck, what should we be listening and looking for this week?
Well, look, Joe Biden's lead has been powered by anti-Trump fervor. This week is a chance for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in the campaign to provide material, to make the case of why people should be voting for their agenda. They're doing well right now by being anti-Trump, and we're going to hear a lot of anti-Trump. But this week, for it to be a success, they need to have people starting to think about being for Joe Biden.
All right, Chuck, thank you so much. And let's go to Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who is addressing the convention live. Let's watch.
Hello, America. I'm Governor Gretchen Whitmer, or as Donald Trump calls me, that woman from Michigan. Tonight I'm here at UAW Local 652 in Lansing, Michigan. Auto workers in this union and across our state could have lost their jobs if not for Barack Obama and Joe Biden. In 2009, the Obama-Biden administration inherited the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. The auto industry on the brink of collapse, 1 million jobs at stake. But President Obama and Vice President Biden didn't waste time blaming anyone else or shirking their responsibility. They got to work. They brought together union members, companies, and lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, and they saved the auto industry. And wouldn't you know, just a few months ago, as our nation began battling COVID-19, auto workers across Michigan sprang into action. They started making protective equipment for doctors and nurses on the front lines. Let me break it down. President Obama and Vice President Biden saved these auto workers' livelihoods. Then these workers did their part to save American lives. That's the story of this great nation. Action begets action. Progress begets progress. And when we work together, we can accomplish anything. After all, democracy is a team sport, especially now. It's crucial that we rally together to fight this virus and build our economy back better. From the jump, we took this pandemic seriously in Michigan. We listened to medical experts. We planned. And with a lot of work from the auto workers and too little help from the White House, we executed our plan. We saved thousands of lives. Just imagine if we had a national strategy. So everyone who needs a test gets one for free. So everyone has access to a safe vaccine. So our kids and educators have the resources they need to safely get back to school. With Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in the White House, we will. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will lead by example. It'll be science, not politics or ego, that will drive their decisions. They know the health of our people goes hand in hand with the strength of our economy. They know action begets action. Over the past few months, we've learned what's essential, rising to the challenge, not denying it. We've learned who is essential too, not just the wealthiest among us, not a president who fights his fellow Americans rather than fight the virus that's killing us and our economy. It's the people who put their own health at risk to care for the rest of us. They are the MVPs. The nurses and the doctors, the utility workers, truck drivers, and grocery clerks, the child care workers, the parents, the teachers, the mail carriers, and the auto workers. So many of these essential workers have lost their lives to COVID. Nearly 1,000 healthcare workers, more than 170,000 people across America, including a 5-year-old girl named Skylar from Detroit, whose mom is a police officer and dad is a firefighter. Generation after generation, our nation has been defined by what we do or what we fail to do. So, for Skylar, for her parents, and in the memory of all those we've lost, let us act. Let us heal as one nation. Let us find strength to do the work.
Governor Gretchen Whitmer, the first speaker of this hour. The Michigan governor has received a lot of attention, certainly for her handling of the coronavirus pandemic, also some criticism. Joining our coverage, senior Washington correspondent Andrea Mitchell. Andrea said she didn't want to leave Michigan, even though her name appeared on that VP list. What is her future in this party?
Oh, she's got a great future in the party. And Joe Biden, really liked her and was very inclined to go with her as a running mate. But first, she has a lot of credibility for the way she handled the pandemic in Michigan. And that's what she was really aiming at tonight, and also trying to reach out to those Trump Democrats, the auto workers, the other union members. You know, they've lost Michigan by 10,000 votes, and this is a critical state for them to reclaim, and that's why she was given such a great platform tonight.
Absolutely. And speaking of a big platform, tonight is Michelle Obama's night. She is essentially the keynote speaker. We await any moment someone you might not expect to see at a Democratic convention, former Republican Governor of Ohio, John Kasich. That's coming up next as we keep our eye on that Democratic convention feed. But we want to turn now for more analysis to NBC News contributors, Senator Claire McCaskill, former senator from Missouri, and the editor of the National Review, Rich Lowry. Senator McCaskill, you're a Democrat, so you get to go first tonight. And let's pick up on where Andrea just left off, because it's no accident that Democrats are launching in Michigan with the governor of Michigan. That is a must-win state. Democrats have to reclaim this Rust Belt Midwest territory that you know so well.
Yeah, I think you're going to see Pennsylvania, you're going to see Michigan, you're going to see Wisconsin over and over again in this convention. But I'm struck by how this first night of the convention is dominated by women. The vast majority of the speakers are women, anchored by Michelle Obama. Joe Biden enjoys a huge lead among women right now, and I think he is nodding to the fact that he knows that the path to the White House for him is paved with women's votes.
And Rich, Lester Holt here, while we wait for Governor Kasich. I just want to get your thoughts on what we've seen so far in terms of the production of this. Nobody knew going in what a virtual convention would look like.
Yeah, I think it's hard. You know, it's hard to substitute the energy of a crowd of thousands of people. It's hard for any speaker to really blow the roof off the joint. And good politicians, good orators, they feed off a crowd, and that's just not going to be there. It's not going to be there all this week for Democrats. It's not going to be there next week for Republicans either.
It's going to be very interesting. And speaking of Republicans, we are hearing from them right now. Actually, what you see on your screen, this DNC feed, is a spate of Republicans who say they will vote for Joe Biden. And about to speak is former Ohio Governor John Kasich, who, of course, ran against Donald Trump. He's been a frequent critic. Now he's going to make a direct appeal to Republicans, disaffected Republicans, to say it is time to put country over party. Let's listen.
A real choice, a choice we make as individuals and as a nation about which path we want to take when we've come to challenging times. America is at that crossroads today. The stakes in this election are greater than any in modern times. Many of us have been deeply concerned about the current path we've been following for the past 4 years. It's a path that's led to division, dysfunction, irresponsibility, and growing vitriol between our citizens. Continuing to follow that path will have terrible consequences for America's soul, because we're being taken down the wrong road by a president who is pitted one against the other. He's unlike all of our best leaders before him, who worked to unite us, to bridge our differences, and lead us to a united America. I'm a lifelong Republican, but that attachment holds second place to my responsibility to my country. That's why I've chosen to appear at this convention. In normal times, something like this would probably never happen, but these are not normal times. I'm proud of my Republican heritage. It's the party of Lincoln, who reflected its founding principles of unity and a higher purpose. But what I have witnessed these past 4 years belies those principles. Many of us can't imagine 4 more years going down this path. And that's why I'm asking you to join with me in choosing a better way forward. I believe the best of America lies ahead, but only when we rediscovered our shared belief in the United States of America for our children's future, which can be bright, hopeful, and inspired if we choose to make it so. I've known Joe Biden for 30 years. I know his story of profound grief that has so deeply affected his character. I know Joe is a good man, a man of faith, a unifier, someone who understands the hopes and dreams of the common man and the common woman, a man who can help us to see the humanity in each other. He knows that the path to a restored and rejuvenated America lies in respect and unity and a common purpose for everyone. Yes, there are areas where Joe and I absolutely disagree, but that's okay, because that's America. Because whatever our differences, we respect one another as human beings, each of us searching for justice and for purpose. We can all see what's going on in our country today and all the questions that are facing us, and no one person or party has all the answers. But what we do know is that we can do better than what we've been seeing today, for sure. And I know that Joe Biden, with his experience and his wisdom and his decency, can bring us together to help us find that better way. I'm sure there are Republicans and independents who couldn't imagine crossing over to support a Democrat. They fear Joe may turn sharp left and leave them behind. I don't believe that, because I know the measure of the man. It's reasonable, faithful, respectful. And you know, no one pushes Joe around. Joe Biden is a man for our times, times that call for all of us to take off our partisan hats and put our nation first for ourselves and, of course, for our children. When America chooses the right path and pulls together, like we've done so many times before, we can dream big dreams, and we can see the top of the mountain as a United States of America with a soul that is a beacon of freedom to the entire world.
Not a Democratic convert, but for the time being, he is putting his Republican stripes to the side. Of course, not a surprise to anyone who's followed him. He's been a frequent and long critic of Donald Trump. But indeed, there were some people probably looking double-taking when they saw his name on this list.
Well, this is a night where we're going to see the entire ideological spectrum of the Democratic Party, and I guess sort of not the Democratic Party as well. We've seen a Republican now, a few Republicans, and we're also going to hear from Bernie Sanders, who, of course, represents the left wing of the Democratic Party. So all bases covered tonight.
Yeah, NBC's Garrett Hake has been talking to voters in Milwaukee about the economy. Garrett, what have you been hearing?
Well, Lester, I was talking to voters today, primarily African-American voters here, and I heard two themes over and over again. First, the lack of economic opportunity that still exists in this country, predating the pandemic, but so exacerbated by it. Folks who perhaps supported Donald Trump or were willing to look at supporting him, hoping he would bring industrial jobs back to some of these cities in the Midwest, who were left disappointed. And then the other thing that kept coming up in my conversation with African-American voters today was the the killing of George Floyd and the police reform movement that came out of it. A lot of folks participating in those protests, finding their voices for the first time politically, and choosing to engage in this moment in service of those goals and reaching out for more of that economic opportunity at a time when a lot of folks, even in 2016 in these communities, were willing to sit on the sidelines.
Now, and we should note, Garrett, you're in the city that had thought it would be hosting this 4-day event. Obviously, it can't, but still being embraced. It was important for Democrats to try to make a move in Wisconsin and to place that as a location. But as the host said this evening, they wanted to be responsible and have a virtual convention.
And now both conventions, Republicans and Democrats, are largely virtual, and that's the new normal we find ourselves in the midst of a global pandemic. Let's go to NBC's Jeff Bennett. He's been reporting on this controversy over the cutbacks and service disruptions at the post office and the president's campaign against mail-in voting. This is a big issue right now. Jeff, what can you tell us?
Hey there, Savannah. Well, in the face of President Trump's unprecedented and unfounded attacks on the Postal Service and mail-in voting, House Democrats are now fighting back. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has summoned her members back to the Hill, where they will have a rare weekend Saturday session, and they're going to vote on legislation that would provide the Postal Service with a cash infusion and also roll back the changes put in place by the new Postmaster General, a man named Louis DeJoy, who, as you well know, is a Republican mega donor, prolific Trump fundraiser, who put in place these changes that have slowed mail delivery. And this is a huge issue because the Postal Service has now warned some 46 states that their mail-in ballots may not be received in time. And as you can see on our website there, the Plan Your Vote initiative, most of the country now, you can vote absentee without an excuse. And there's another point here that's important, too, because there's so much information about what the post office is prepared to do. Can they handle it? Are they up to the job come November? The president says they can't, but the Postal Service and post office workers I've talked to say they are 100% up to the job. They have the capacity. They handle billions of greeting cards at the holidays. I'm told that they can handle a few 100 million mail-in ballots. It's a question not of capacity, but of them being empowered to do the work, and they want these onerous restrictions rolled back, Savannah.
All right, Jeff, thank you very much.
All right, you had that map up there of the voting in various states, mail-in voting. Chuck Todd's been looking at his own map, studying the electoral landscape, if you will, and the latest for us now in those battleground states. Chuck, what do you see?
Well, look, I think tonight we're getting an education on what matters tonight, and I think you're going to see this all week. And there's sort of two groups of swing states. There's the northern tier of swing states and the southern tier of swing states. And in the northern tier, it's not an accident tonight, guys, that the first person we heard from in the 10 o'clock hour, the governor of Michigan. Where's this convention supposed to be taking place? In the state of Wisconsin. Who's the first Republican that they got to switch over and talk? The former governor of Ohio. The point is, you can see a pattern, particularly tonight, even with Michelle Obama, who speaks really well to those Obama-Trump voters, or Bernie Sanders, who also speaks well to those working-class white voters who voted for him in primaries but seem to support Trump in 2016. There is a sort of targeting with tonight, and you can see it. It is in the industrial Midwest. You could tell they really want to talk to those voters almost more so than any tonight. Not to say they're not going to be talking to swing voters in Florida, Arizona, North Carolina as this convention week goes on. But tonight in particular, I see a real concentrated effort about those three states that they lost in 2016 that they didn't think they would lose: Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania.
And we should note Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota is going to be our next speaker.
Yet another tonight. Midwesterner, yes.
Yeah, I think we're catching your drift there, Chuck. The Midwest is where the action is for the Democrats in terms of the battlegrounds, and for the Republicans as well. That's the hard-fought territory. Tonight's marquee event is a speech by the former First Lady, Michelle Obama. We turned to NBC's Kristen Welker, our White House correspondent, and just judging by the excerpts that have already been released, we're seeing a side of Michelle Obama we haven't really seen before.
That's right, Savannah. The former First Lady is going to cast this as a referendum on President Trump, and she will characterize this as a state of failed leadership on the issue of COVID, on the issue of the economy, as well as race relations, and she's going to make the case for Joe Biden. She will say that he was a fantastic vice president and that he knows what it takes to get the economy back on track. Now, that's significant because in national polls, Joe Biden is leading, but President President Trump gets higher marks on that critical issue of the economy. So no mistake there that the former First Lady is raising that issue. But she's also going to speak in very personal terms, Savannah. She's going to try to make the case that Joe Biden is someone who knows how to listen because he has experienced loss in his own life. Now, earlier today, President Trump tried to engage in a little bit of counter-programming, and he essentially dismissed the speech and said, who wants to hear a taped speech by the former First Lady, Michelle Obama? Well, the reality is, if you look at the polls, she is one of the most popular political figures in the entire country. And I can tell you, I have spoken with White House and campaign officials. They believe she has a very powerful voice. They also believe she's someone who could potentially not only help to unify the Democratic Party, but to reach across the aisle and win over some of those Trump voters, Savannah.
All right, Kristen, thank you so much. That's a little later this hour. We are expecting any moment to hear from Senator Amy Klobuchar, who was, of course, one of the many primary competitors in the primary campaign that Biden ultimately won. You see Eva Longoria right there, the actress on the screen. She's the moderator for the DNC for tonight's event. In a moment, we'll hear from Senator Klobuchar of Minnesota, where the president visited today, actually doing some of this counter-programming that Kristen talked about.
He is, and we've seen him do that in the past to counter-program. And we should point out, I know it gets a little busy on that screen, but that upper right corner, that's the running feed from the DNC of the events there. And, of course, we'll be carrying Amy Klobuchar, the senator from Minnesota, who is beginning her remarks now.
Hello, America. Like my friend Catherine, I believe that the right to vote is fundamental and the post office is essential. You know, the president may hate the post office, but he's still going to have to send them a change of address card come January. Donald Trump just happens to be in my state today, trying to divide people instead of responding to the pandemic and the significant needs of our economy. But Democrats, independents, and yes, many Republicans have had enough of his divisiveness. Tonight, my friends, in contrast, we've heard a lot about how we can unite as Americans, about our shared values, our shared dreams, how we've come together in the face of crisis. But I want to be clear. Unity isn't about settling. It's about striving for something more. It isn't the end, it's the means. It's how we get stuff done. Unity is about reaching up toward a higher purpose, a better future for all of us. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. It is more than a motto. It is the North Star for our democracy. Now more than ever, we need a president who will unite this country. We need a president who, in George Floyd's memory, instead of using the Bible as a prop, will heed its words, to act justly. We need a president for the workers who've lost their jobs because this administration is selling American workers out when we need to buy American. For the farmers and manufacturers and the people of rural America who are sick and tired of reaping what he's sown. We need a president who will look out for the seniors like my dad, whose families now visit them through glass windows, never knowing if it will be the last time they see them. We need a president for all of America. I come from the middle of this country where we believe in people joining together to solve problems. We seek common ground to reach higher ground. That's been Joe Biden's life's work. He's a man of scrappy, working-class roots, a man whose own hardships have only made him more determined to lift up those who have been left out. He understands redemption, and he knows resilience. Joe Biden's a man of deep experience. Barack Obama, better known tonight as Michelle's husband, he leaned on Joe for his strength and decency, and you can too. You know, most candidates, when they end their campaign, that day is a hard one. For me, it was a moment filled with great joy, because the day I ended my presidential campaign was also the day I endorsed Joe Biden. Joe ran for the same reasons I did when I announced my campaign in the middle of that blizzard on the banks of the Mississippi River. To cross the river of our divides, to bring this nation together, to be a president for all of America. As I said the day I endorsed him, If you feel stuck in the middle of the extremes in our politics, if you are tired of the noise and the nonsense, you have a home with me, and you have a home with Joe Biden. That's why I was so proud to stand with him then and across this great country. That's why we are all now standing united behind Joe and my friend Kamala. Our nation's motto is out of many, one. And as you're about to see, it's also the story of the Democratic primary. Thank you, America.
We all ran for president, motivated by the same reason.
As I watched President Trump divide this country more and more, I thought to myself, what are you willing to do to stop him?
You had the most destructive, hateful, racist president in the history of this country, who is literally tearing apart the fabric of the United States of America.
Donald Trump is a failed business person and desperately failed us as a president.
We will run! I ran for president because I think it's urgent that we heal the divisions in this nation.
We are still in control of our own future, and we need to provide millions of Americans a real path forward.
A green jobs program.
Increasing the minimum wage.
Passing a national paid leave bill.
Student loan debt.
Mental health, starting with our veterans.
Reproductive justice.
Economic justice.
Racial justice.
And there is so much a new president can do to bring us together.
It's time to get up. Get up.
Starting a presidential campaign is daunting. I mean, you have to reach hundreds of millions of people.
You have these incredibly long days, often capped off by these evening events that go on for hours and hours.
Your challenge as a candidate is to be true to yourself and true to why you ran in the first place. That is something, by the way, that I really admire about Joe Biden. He really is his own man. He knows who he is.
Joe Biden is somebody who deeply cares about people who are marginalized, who are being left behind, who are being ignored.
I'm a DACA recipient, and I owe you everything. Thank you so much.
And you're staying, man. You know, he's had some hard times in his life. He's had some losses in his life. And I think that is something that people relate to. You doing okay?
Yep, close to 15 years cancer-free.
God love you. Well, I was at a service for 4 fallen Afghanistan soldiers, and I saw those families who were so comforted by Joe Biden. When they walked out, they knew someone cared for them. Someone could relate to their own pain they were having. We need that in the White House.
I still remember standing side by side with him on the debate stage, and we were having a go of it. But what was remarkable to me was in the commercial break, he puts his arm around me and starts telling me how good my ideas are. And next thing you know, I feel like he's giving me a pep talk and literally telling me how important it is, how really important it is that I'm on that stage.
Joe called me the night I suspended and was extraordinarily gracious and comforting, and he told me I should be proud of myself, said that I did myself and my family a real service and the country a service, and that meant a lot coming from Joe.
Look, it's not easy to unite the Democratic Party. We're a rambunctious group. Joe Biden has pulled it off.
He wants to get the best ideas on the table so we can move forward in the best way possible.
He's included my family Bill of Rights.
He has unified our group around a clean energy strategy.
The Domestic Workers Bill of Rights, I'm very excited that that's in there.
He's the kind of leader that brings other leaders in.
This is a guy that's going to walk into the Oval Office and not have to find his way around, but it will actually walk in and have already sort of honed the instincts you need to lead the most powerful nation on earth through a crisis.
On the other side, Donald Trump does not understand who we are as Americans. He really doesn't.
This is a guy that blames everyone for everything. You know, he blames the city of Baltimore. He blames the country of Denmark. He blames the Prime Minister of Canada for cutting him out of the Canadian version of Home Alone 2. Who does that?
There are no sidelines. There's no sitting this one out. There's no hoping that someone else is going to come in and save the day. There is no cavalry. We are the cavalry.
The moment has found the person. That person is Joe Biden.
Joe has my vote because he will bring decency and dignity back to the White House.
We've got one shot to make Donald Trump a one-term president, and that shot is right now.
It's showtime! It's showtime!
Vice President, right here.
And that, of course, is from the Democratic National Convention. Recognize some of those faces. Those are the candidates who faced off. Remember, Lester?
That first debate in Miami.
2 nights, 20 candidates.
I just remember the names and the faces laid out in front of me. There were so many.
There were so many, and it was all boils down to one, Joe Biden. Now it's his convention, it's his party, it's his night. And yet tonight we're still going to hear from Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders.
Who was not a part of that video.
That's right, because he's about to have his say. We'll join that live. Also, former First Lady Michelle Obama. Our coverage of the Democratic National Convention, night 1, continues. Stay with us.
Among the chaos that I found a father trying to teach his son about peace.
We don't have to retaliate with anger. We retaliate with love. That's why we're down here. There's always another way. So that's all I want him to see.
When you need brutal honesty.
This isn't about Donald Trump. This is about 400 years of racism.
When you need answers first thing in the morning.
What needs to be done to make ballots ready to go for the presidential election in November?
When you need to go deep inside the story.
What's a policy change in policing that you would like to see enacted?
And hear from someone who's been there.
Who's telling the truth and who's lying every day. That's the news story Americans want to hear.
You need your Morning Joe, only on MSNBC.
We'd like to think that we live in some sort of post-racial America. We're reminded time and time again that we do not.
Chanel, I reached out to you after I watched the mayor of Atlanta act as a mom trying to raise her son, and I think about you and your kids.
I remember her coming home saying, why don't I have a ponytail like the white girls? It's okay to notice that you're different. You just have to not feel less than. That's my thing.
I cherish the fact that we can have these discussions. I feel safe talking about this with you guys.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
We actually saw a large convoy of the National Guard come through here.
It's news made for your streaming world. Live weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Eastern.
A virus that knows no borders.
A real catastrophe happening here in Brazil before our very eyes.
Our global fight against it unites us.
Here in Mexico City, the people I spoke to said if they don't work, they're not going to be able to feed their families.
Our NBC News and Sky teams are on the ground, learning from where it's been.
The South Korean government is bringing students back over the next couple of weeks in stages.
So that you can better understand how it will impact us here.
Life across Italy is back to normal. It just doesn't look like the same normal as before.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
These are the United States, a united people with a united purpose.
The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave.
A great people has been moved to defend a great nation.
All of us can extend a hand to those in need. What do you think needs to be fixed, and what would count as justice in this case?
Do you have clarity on what the president has actually ordered? I have to ask whether the Democratic Party can turn this around so that this is an engine for progressive political change. People are not 6 feet apart from one another for the most part. Are you worried that these two crises may dovetail in terms of the risk of transmission at these ongoing protests?
More Americans watch NBC News than any other news organization in the world.
So before the break, we saw that video of all the Democratic challengers in a moment of unity. We didn't hear from Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders because we are about to hear from him in a speech. He won more than a quarter of the votes cast in the Democratic primaries, but he has since endorsed Joe Biden, who will need those progressive Sanders voters come this fall. And it'll be interesting to hear the tone, the difference in tone this time as opposed to 4 years ago, where he really expressed his disappointment and some might even call some bitterness over his loss.
Bernie Sanders is incredibly influential to his day in this party, and he knows it. 4 years ago, it was hard for him to let go. That was a hard-fought primary, and it showed in the convention speech that we saw 4 years ago. Tonight, though, we're expecting Bernie Sanders to be striking that note of unity, expecting a direct appeal to his supporters. He's going to be speaking live from a restaurant in his home state of Vermont in Burlington, and people will be listening very closely to exactly how he reaches out to progressives in the party.
Yeah, that's obviously been the big difference is the progressive moderate wing of the party. What do we see that on display here? This is a night of unity. Remember, the theme is We the People, and we would expect him to offer a calmer tone, if you will, while still giving voice to his group.
Good evening. Our great nation is now living in an unprecedented moment. We're facing the worst public health crisis in 100 years and the worst economic collapse since the Great Depression. We are confronting systemic racism and the enormous threat to our planet of climate change. And in the midst of all of this, we have a president who is not only incapable of addressing these crises, but is leading us down the path of authoritarianism. This election is the most important in the modern history of this country. In response to the unprecedented crises we face, we need an unprecedented response, a movement like never before, of people who are prepared to stand up and fight for democracy and decency and against greed, oligarchy, and bigotry. And we need Joe Biden as our next president. Let me take this opportunity to say a word to the millions of people who supported my campaign this year and in 2016. My friends, thank you for your trust, your support, and the love you showed Jane, me, and our family. Together, we have moved this country in a bold new direction, showing that all of us, black and white, Latino, Native American, Asian American, gay and straight, native-born and immigrant, yearn for a nation based on the principles of justice, love, and compassion. Our campaign ended several months ago, but our movement continues and is getting stronger every day. Many of the ideas we fought for that just a few years ago were considered radical are now mainstream. But let us be clear, if Donald Trump is reelected, all the progress we have made will be in jeopardy. At its most basic, this election is about preserving our democracy. During this president's term, the unthinkable has become normal. He has tried to prevent people from voting, undermined the U.S. Postal Service, deployed the military and federal agents against peaceful protesters, threatened to delay the election, and suggested that he will not leave office if he loses. This is not normal, and we must never treat it like it is. Under this administration, authoritarianism has taken root in our country. I and my family, and many of yours, know the insidious way authoritarianism destroys democracy, decency, and humanity. As long as I am here, I will work with progressives, with moderates, and yes, with conservatives to preserve this nation from a threat that so many of our heroes fought and died to defeat. This president is not just a threat to our democracy, but by rejecting science, he has put our lives and health in jeopardy. Trump has attacked doctors and scientists trying to protect us from the pandemic, while refusing to take strong action to produce the masks, gowns, and gloves our healthcare workers desperately need. Nero fiddled while Rome burned. Trump golfs. His actions fanned this pandemic resulting in over 170,000 deaths and a nation still unprepared to protect its people. Furthermore, Trump's negligence has exacerbated the economic crisis we are now experiencing. Since this pandemic began, over 30 million people have lost their jobs, and many have lost their health insurance. Millions of working families are wondering how they will feed their kids, and they're worried that they will be evicted from their homes. And how has Trump responded? Instead of maintaining the $600 a week unemployment supplement that workers were receiving and the $1,200 emergency checks that many of you received, instead of helping small businesses, Trump concocted fraudulent executive orders that do virtually nothing to address the crisis while threatening the very future of Social Security and Medicare. But the truth is that even before Trump's negligent response to this pandemic, too many hardworking families have been caught on an economic treadmill with no hope of ever getting ahead. Together, we must build a nation that is more equitable, more compassionate, and more inclusive. I know that Joe Biden will begin that fight on day one. Let me offer you just a few examples of how Joe will move us forward. Joe supports raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. This will give 40 million workers a pay raise and push the wage scale up for everyone else. Joe will also make it easier for workers to join unions, create 12 weeks of paid family leave, fund universal pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds, and make child care affordable for millions of families. Joe will rebuild our crumbling infrastructure and fight the threat of climate change by transitioning us to 100% clean electricity over the next 15 years. These initiatives will create millions of good-paying jobs all across our country. As you know, we are the only industrialized nation not to guarantee health care for all people. While Joe and I disagree on the best path to get universal coverage, he has a plan that will greatly expand health care and cut the cost of prescription drugs. Further, he will lower the eligibility age of Medicare from 65 down to 60. To help reform our broken criminal justice system, Joe will end private prisons and detention centers, cash bail, and the school-to-prison pipeline. And to heal the soul of our nation, Joe Biden will end the hate and division Trump has created. He will stop the demonization of immigrants, the coddling of white nationalists, the racist dog whistling, the religious bigotry, and the ugly attacks on women. My friends, I say to you, to everyone who supported other candidates in the primary, and to those who may have voted for Donald Trump in the last election, the future of our democracy is at stake. The future of our economy is at stake. The future of our planet is at stake. We must come together, defeat Donald Trump, and elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as our next president and vice president. My friends, the price of failure is just too great to imagine. Thank you.
Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders on night one of the Democratic National Convention, a searing indictment of the incumbent President Trump, and also a call to unity and common cause across the ideological spectrum for Democrats. And the next speaker we expect, Michelle Obama, the former First Lady. We have a moment to pause before that starts and go to senior Washington correspondent Andrea Mitchell with what we are expecting from the former First Lady tonight.
Well, what we're expecting from her is a much more political speech than we usually hear from her. We know that Michelle Obama hates politics, but she is going to be political tonight, taking on Donald Trump, but also telling the country and telling Democrats about the Joe Biden that she knows. She will be validating him in a very personal way. And that's an important endorsement from the most popular Democrat, the Democratic Party. Savannah? She
was famous, of course, for the line, when they go low, we go high. The question is, how high will she go? How will she temper those remarks going after Donald Trump tonight?
Well, she has said that going high means getting involved, and that is what she's going to be talking about tonight, calling them to action.
Do you think it was difficult getting her to speak tonight?
I don't think it was difficult. I think she is in this to win it. She has been talking about voting rights, getting people out to vote. That is her big mission. She's been very out front and defending Kamala Harris from racist attacks just last week.
Andrea Mitchell, thanks very much. And there is the former First Lady about to appear. Eva Longoria is the celebrity host for tonight. There's a celebrity host every night this week, but she is preparing the introduction for Michelle Obama, who is, as Andrea pointed out, tremendously popular in this party and a voice that people often want to hear. And we will see what she will bring now on this night in which Democrats have gone with the title of We the People.
Good evening, everyone. It's a hard time, and everyone's feeling it in different ways. And I know a lot of folks are reluctant to tune into a political convention right now or to politics in general. Believe me, I get that. But I am here tonight because I love this country with all my heart. And it pains me to see so many people hurting. I've met so many of you. I've heard your stories. And through you, I have seen this country's promise. And thanks to so many who came before me, thanks to their toil and sweat and blood, I've been able to live that promise myself. That's the story of America. All those folks who sacrificed and overcame so much in their own times because they wanted something more, something better for their kids. There's a lot of beauty in that story. There's a lot of pain in it, too. A lot of struggle and injustice and work left to do. And who we choose as our president in this election will determine whether or not we honor that struggle and chip away at that injustice and keep alive the very possibility of finishing that work. I am one of a handful of people living today who have seen firsthand the immense weight and awesome power of the presidency. And let me once again tell you this: the job is hard. It requires clear-headed judgment, a mastery of complex and competing issues, a devotion to facts and history, a moral compass, and an ability to listen, and an abiding belief that each of the 330 million lives in this country has meaning and worth. A president's words have the power to move markets. They can start wars or broker peace. They can summon our better angels or awaken our worst instincts. You simply cannot fake your way through this job. As I've said before, being president doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you are. Well, a presidential election can reveal who we are, too. And 4 years ago, too many people chose to believe that their votes didn't matter. Maybe they were fed up. Maybe they thought the outcome wouldn't be close. Maybe the barriers felt too steep, whatever the reason. In the end, those choices sent someone to the Oval Office who lost the national popular vote by nearly 3 million votes. In one of the states that determined the outcome, the winning margin averaged out to just 2 votes per precinct. 2 votes. And we've all been living with the consequences. When my husband left office with Joe Biden at his side, We had a record-breaking stretch of job creation. We'd secured the right to health care for 20 million people. We were respected around the world, rallying our allies to confront climate change. And our leaders had worked hand in hand with scientists to help prevent an Ebola outbreak from becoming a global pandemic. 4 years later, the state of this nation is very different. More than 150,000 people have died, and our economy is in shambles because of a virus that this president downplayed for too long. It has left millions of people jobless. Too many have lost their health care. Too many are struggling to take care of basic necessities like food and rent. Too many communities have been left in the lurch to grapple with whether and how to open our schools safely. Internationally, we've turned our back, not just on agreements forged by my husband, but on alliances championed by presidents like Reagan and Eisenhower. And here at home, as George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and a never-ending list of innocent people of color continue to be murdered, stating the simple fact that a Black Life Matters is still met with derision from the nation's highest office. Because whenever we look to this White House for some leadership or consolation or any semblance of steadiness, what we get instead is chaos, division, and a total and utter lack of empathy. Empathy, that's something I've been thinking a lot about lately. The ability to walk in someone else's shoes. The recognition that someone else's experience has value too. Most of us practice this without a second thought. If we see someone suffering or struggling, we don't stand in judgment, we reach out. Because there, but for the grace of God, go I. It is not a hard concept to grasp. It's what we teach our children. And like so many of you, Barack and I have tried our best to instill in our girls a strong moral foundation to carry forward the values that our parents and grandparents poured into us. But right now, kids in this country are seeing what happens when we stop requiring empathy of one another. They're looking around wondering if we've been lying to them this whole time about who we are and what we truly value. They see people shouting in grocery stores, unwilling to wear a mask to keep us all safe. They see people calling the police on folks minding their own business just because of the color of their skin. They see an entitlement that says only certain people belong here. That greed is good and winning is everything, because as long as you come out on top, it doesn't matter what happens to everyone else. And they see what happens when that lack of empathy is ginned up into outright disdain. They see our leaders labeling fellow citizens enemies of the state while emboldening torch-bearing white supremacists. They watch in horror as children are torn from their families and thrown into cages, and pepper spray and rubber bullets are used on peaceful protesters for a photo op. Sadly, this is the America that is on display for the next generation. A nation that's underperforming not simply on matters of policy, but on matters of character. And that's not just disappointing, it's downright infuriating. Because I know the goodness and the grace that is out there in households and neighborhoods all across this nation. And I know that regardless of our race, age, religion, or politics, when we close out the noise and the fear and truly open our hearts, we know that what's going on in this country is just not right. This is not who we want to be. So what do we do now? What's our strategy? Over the past 4 years, a lot of people have asked me, when others are going so low, does going high still really work? My answer, going high is the only thing that works. Because when we go low, when we use those same tactics of degrading and dehumanizing others, we just become part of the ugly noise that's drowning out everything else. We degrade ourselves. We degrade the very causes for which we fight. But let's be clear. Going high does not mean putting on a smile and saying nice things when confronted by viciousness and cruelty. Going high means taking the harder path. It means scraping and clawing our way to that mountaintop. Going high means standing fierce against hatred while remembering that we are one nation under God. And if we want to survive, we've got to find a way to live together and work together across our differences. And going high means unlocking the shackles of lies and mistrust with the only thing that can truly set us free, the cold, hard truth. So let me be as honest and clear as I possibly can. Donald Trump is the wrong president for our country. He has had more than enough time to prove that he can do the job, but he is clearly in over his head. He cannot meet this moment. He simply cannot be who we need him to be for us. It is what it is. Now, I understand that my message won't be heard by some people. We live in a nation that is deeply divided, and I am a Black woman speaking at the Democratic Convention. But enough of you know me by now. You know that I tell you exactly what I'm feeling. You know I hate politics, but you also know that I care about this nation. You know how much I care about all of our children. So if you take one thing from my words tonight, it is this. If you think things cannot possibly get worse, trust me, they can and they will if we don't make a change in this election. If we have any hope of ending this chaos, we have got to vote for Joe Biden like our lives depend on it. I know Joe. He is a profoundly decent man, guided by faith. He was a terrific vice president. He knows what it takes to rescue an economy, beat back a pandemic, and lead our country. And he listens. He will tell the truth and trust science. He will make smart plans and manage a good team. And he will govern as someone who's lived a life that the rest of us can recognize. When he was a kid, Joe's father lost his job. When he was a young senator, Joe lost his wife and his baby daughter. And when he was vice president, he lost his beloved son. So Joe knows the anguish of sitting at a table with an empty chair, which is why he gives his time so freely to grieving parents. Joe knows what it's like to struggle, which is why he gives his personal phone number to kids overcoming a stutter of their own. His life is a testament to getting back up. And he is going to channel that same grit and passion to pick us all up, to help us heal and guide us forward. Now, Joe is not perfect, and he'd be the first to tell you that. But there is no perfect candidate, no perfect president. And his ability to learn and grow, we find in that the kind of humility and maturity that so many of us yearn for right now. Because Joe Biden has served this nation his entire life without ever losing sight of who he is. But more than that, he has never lost sight of who we are, all of us. Joe Biden wants all of our kids to go to a good school, see a doctor when they're sick, live on a healthy planet. And he's got plans to make all of that happen. Joe Biden wants all of our kids, no matter what they look like, to be able to walk out the door without worrying about being harassed or arrested or killed. He wants all of our kids to be able to go to a movie or a math class without being afraid of getting shot. He wants all our kids to grow up with leaders who won't just serve themselves and their wealthy peers, but will provide a safety net for people facing hard times. And if we want a chance to pursue any of these goals, any of these most basic requirements for a functioning society, we have to vote for Joe Biden in numbers that cannot be ignored. Because right now, folks who know they cannot win fair and square at the ballot box are doing everything they can to stop us from voting. They're closing down polling places in minority neighborhoods. They're purging voter rolls. They're sending people out to intimidate voters, and they're lying about the security of our ballots. These tactics are not new. But this is not the time to withhold our votes in protest or play games with candidates who have no chance of winning. We have got to vote like we did in 2008 and 2012. We've got to show up with the same level of passion and hope for Joe Biden. We've got to vote early, in person if we can. We've got to request our mail-in ballots right now, tonight, and send them back immediately, and follow up to make sure they're received, and then make sure our friends and families do the same. We have got to grab our comfortable shoes, put on our masks, pack a brown bag dinner, and maybe breakfast too, because we've got to be willing to stand in line all night if we have to. Look, we have already sacrificed so much this year. So many of you are already going that extra mile. Even when you're exhausted, you're mustering up unimaginable courage to put on those scrubs and give our loved ones a fighting chance. Even when you're anxious, you're delivering those packages, stocking those shelves, and doing all that essential work so that all of us can keep moving forward. Even when it all feels so overwhelming, working parents are somehow piecing it all together without childcare. Teachers are getting creative so that our kids can still learn and grow. Our young people are desperately fighting to pursue their dreams. And when the horrors of systemic racism shook our country and our consciences, millions of Americans of every age, every background rose up to march for each other, crying out for justice and progress. This is who we still are. Compassionate, resilient, decent people whose fortunes are bound up with one another. And it is well past time for our leaders to once again reflect our truth. So it is up to us to add our voices and our votes to the chorus of history, echoing heroes like John Lewis, who said, "When you see something that is not right, you must say something. You must do something." That is the truest form of empathy. Not just feeling, but doing. Not just for ourselves or our kids, but for everyone, for all our kids. And if we want to keep the possibility of progress alive in our time, if we want to be able to look our children in the eye after this election, we have got to reassert our place in American history. And we have got to do everything we can to elect my friend Joe Biden as the next president of the United States. Thank you all. God bless.
Michelle Obama with a passionate endorsement of Joe Biden. And yes, she was critical of President Trump, as we thought. She said Donald Trump is the wrong president for our country. But what this really was, Savannah, at least to me, was you've got to vote, an imperative. You've got to vote like your life depends on it. It was very practical. Yes, an indictment of President Trump. Yes, an endorsement of Joe Biden. But it was so practical in terms of getting out the vote. She practically gave out polling places to voters. Let's do it tonight. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Do it tonight. Get your ballot and send it right back. Let's go to our contributors for NBC News. Claire McCaskill, former senator from Missouri. We also have the editor of National Review here, Rich Lowry, for the Republican side of things. I'll start with you, Senator McCaskill. This issue of voting in a pandemic, how big a concern is it?
Well, it's a big concern. And she stated very clearly that people need to be aware of some of the shenanigans that are going on. And I think, when she told people they may have to pack both a breakfast and a dinner and wait all day and don't leave the line, she is speaking directly to a lot of voters who feel like what Donald Trump has been doing lately is sending a very big signal that he wants to figure out ways for votes not to count. She was powerful tonight, and I think she did a great job contrasting the character and personality of Joe Biden with that of the current president. And Rich, speak to this idea of getting out the vote. How important is it, and how will it turn the corner for the Biden campaign?
Well, it's a major theme of tonight. It's a major theme of Michelle Obama's speech. And I have to say, this gives me no pleasure to say this as a Republican, but she's become a first-class speaker. You saw her growing in this way during the 8 years of Barack Obama's presidency, and it was an effective piece of rhetoric. I will say, though, the emotion of this speech, the emotional punch, was much more anti-Trump than pro-Biden. I would say the same thing was true of Bernie Sanders' speech preceding it. So both the speeches, in my mind, more reflected the current dynamic of the race, which is all about Trump, more referendum on the president than it is about Biden per se. And even though they both said very nice things about Joe Biden, clearly it was crawl over broken glass to go vote against the incumbent. And our polls certainly demonstrate that there's enthusiasm in the Democratic Party, but the enthusiasm is far more unseating President Trump than it is for electing Joe Biden. But whatever the reason, Democrats just want people to the polls, and that clearly was the emphasis of the First Lady's speech. We will be back with some final thoughts and a quick look ahead to the rest of the week when we continue in just a moment.
It is said there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Perhaps the time has come to fully realize the dream upon which this great country was founded: equal justice under the law.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
But we actually saw a large convoy of the National Guard come through here.
It's news made for your streaming world. Live weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Eastern.
Introducing Peacock. What's Peacock? This is Peacock.
Let's go!
It's streaming, launching, premiering. It's TV, movies, exclusive originals, original characters.
Duh.
It's sports.
Breaking news.
Docs, tunes.
Wait, there's more.
More?
Yes, more.
Tons. It's quick stuff, binge stuff, tough stuff, love stuff. It's trending, mind-bending. It's late night, early morning.
Good morning.
It's you see this, you remember that, you watched every single one of those? It's for you, for ew, for aw. It's Chrisley, Pawnee, Monkey, E.T., and it's free.
Free. Who's with me?
That's Peacock. That's who. That's what. That's why.
Come on.
Boom, mic drop. You can't not watch.
We'd like to think that we live in some sort of post-racial America. We are reminded time and time again that we do not.
Now, I reached out to you after I watched the mayor of Atlanta act as a mom, trying to raise her son, and I think about you and your kids.
I remember her coming home saying, why don't I have a ponytail like the white girls? It's okay to notice that you're different. You just have to not feel less than. That's my thing.
I cherish the fact that we can have these discussions. I feel safe talking about this with you guys.
Americans watch NBC News than any other news organization in the world.
We now know what an unconventional convention looks like.
First ever virtual convention. We are allowed to say this is unprecedented. So we've seen night one of the Democratic convention. Next week, the Republicans go, and there's a lot more to come this week, in fact.
Yeah, that concludes our coverage for now of night one of the Democratic National Convention. Still to come this week, Dr. Jill Biden, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama.
And then, of course, the nominees themselves, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, they will take the stage such as it is later in the week. I'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning on the Today Show, and we will be right back here tomorrow night, 10 o'clock Eastern Time.
Until then, for Savannah, Chuck, Andrea, myself, and all of us at NBC News, thank you for joining us, everyone. Have a good night.